But you must have gained from the first time you were on 40 pounds?
I was here in November 2023. I remember that. It was the day before Ashton Forbes. And that was like the lowest of the low. That was when I was at my most unhealthy point.
Mentally and physically.
Everything.
Because it was during a time where like you already found success, but then like what? It was like a lull period for whatever reason.
Yeah, we went through, I mean, Alessi can speak to that. We went through about 6 months where it was like, no matter what we did, no matter how good the click through, what we were doing, nothing would work. And I had told Alessi, I'm glad we got him here today to go through this, because he's been here every fucking step of the way and doesn't get the credit he deserves for that. But we'll make sure we do that today. But like, I remember calling Alessi like July 2023 while I was finalizing getting a place in Hoboken.
Yeah.
And I could feel like I didn't want people worried about me while I was still at my parents' house, because my parents would worry, like especially when I was going through it and no one could figure out what was wrong with me. Like a couple years before, they were so concerned about me, like as their kid.
Yeah.
So once we knew what it was, and I'm like, oh, I'm not dying. Like the symptoms suck, but like I'm good. You know, it was so bad on everything else, and it was affecting me physically, mentally, emotionally, the whole bit. But I did not want them to know that. Yeah. And so then things went really well towards the end of my time at home, which was helpful because it made us just enough money to be able to get up here. And Alessi had moved up to Jersey officially to be here. He had moved up like fucking 5 months before without telling me.
I put the pressure in. I was like, we're gonna
go
first. All in now. We're gonna go all in.
Yeah, I was like, this escalated quickly.
Oh my God, dude, the timeline. It was because he called me. I remember it was 2021 before I went to Brazil for the UFO doc, and he's like, yo, you can be my producer. I'm like, all right. When? He's like, just wait till December. And then December came and he's like, we're not there yet. We're not there yet. And then he's like, we're going to go wait till October. I'm like, in Miami. I'm like, all right, October it is. Coming closer. He's like, it's going to be more like February. And then I'm like, this February. And he's like, all right. And he's like, no, not February. I'm like, I'm coming up, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he kind of forced the issue. But then, you know, things happened. So it was good. And we were getting rolling. Like he got rolling for me, making a fan page that he ran himself August 2022. And he and I would go back and forth long before that too, to be clear. Right. But then when he came up here, coming on with me and just working with me pretty much, he started April 2023, started with the second channel. That's a whole story we'll get into today and everything. But I remember calling him. We had gone through a really good hot streak with the episodes in July. I had made just enough money to be able to like get up here. And I was talking to you at the time because we needed like a backup plan in case shit went wrong and all that. And I said to him, I was like, you know, between you and me, I'm not doing well. So the good news is now that I move up here, I know what I got to do for treatment, and I'm going to do that. I always said when I got out of my parents' house and I moved up to the city, like I'd live close to a doctor's office, I'd be able to do this treatment, go all in on the immunotherapy. And I was like, that's, you know, they're testing me out right now to be able to make basically what they're going to inject with me over the next few years. All right. And I'm like, that'll probably start in November-ish. But I'm just warning you, like I need you to bear with me over the next like 6-9 months because it's not good. I'm in a terrible mood all the time. It's just like not good. And I'm saying this at a time when things, at least on the views and the channel growing, were really good. What I did not see coming was what happened next, where we went through that 6-month period. So when I tell you, like, Alessi dealt with me at the lowest of the low, where I had no concept of like being a real human being, he really did. And I will forever appreciate that. He's seen me at my there are ex-girlfriends that have not seen me in as bad of a situation, like emotionally, as he ever saw me in there. So, you know, it worked out. But that period, because you brought it up, like when I was talking to you, we were smack dab in the middle of that. Little did I know the next day we were going to record something that caused like a whole problem too. But, you know, it was an interesting time. And in hindsight, like it was the bottom of it. Like that shirt I was telling you that Alessi designed for our merch last year that has that quote from my tweet on the back. It's buy my stock now because it's the lowest it's ever going to be. I tweeted it right around that time, and
you knew
it's been accurate. But I was the lowest I was ever going to be, like in my life, physically. I mean, I had lost my whole body from 3-4 years before, just disintegrated away, my skin, all of it. And I was like at the lowest point I was going to be mentally, emotionally, the whole bit. And that's just been a process getting here. And like, I'm in a lot better place right now. There's still some stuff I'm working on with myself a little bit, but I'm starting to feel it again, which is good.
No, you look great, and I'm happy to see you doing well. Obviously, I know you're doing well. This was how long after starting the podcast? Was like this lull period?
So I started working on the podcast March 13th, 2020. I used to say the full time started April 1st, 2020, but it's really accurate to say
Whatever,
the
give or
13th.
take. Okay, so it took like 3 years. The point I'm trying to make is, number one, welcome to the podcast, by the way. Thank you guys for coming.
Oh,
The reason you're here is we're celebrating 1 million subscribers.
I thought we were opening
Dude,
up with your take on Israel-Palestine.
Nah.
You have the floor.
Soup or halal food. I don't know.
No wrong answer.
There's definitely a wrong answer. There's for sure wrong answers on that topic, and that is not a topic I will be talking about. If you guys want to talk about it, I will sit and listen. Anyway, the reason you're both here is we want to celebrate 1 million subscribers, a very big feat to accomplish. And I know you don't like taking credit for what you've done, but you've done a tremendous amount, and you have something extremely special that most people do not have. And I know how awkward and uncomfortable you get even hearing that, which is why I think this is important for you to do. But I also think it's important for you guys to share your journey, because I would assume, looking from the outside in, people would assume like this kind of just happened and it was like destined to be. But even when you had moments of glory and you're like, this is taking off, you have this dramatic downtime where you're like, I don't know if I'm ever going to recover.
Right.
So I want to hear, like, from day one, April 1st, 2020, to finding him and then hitting this like
Which is
inflection
early,
point.
by the way.
It was early,
Yeah.
right? So your first guest was, you had 5 episodes, right? Alone, or 3 or 4 episodes alone, and then you started having guests
I
on.
put out 10 day one, and 7 of them were alone. Yeah.
You put out 10.
Yeah, when I launched it publicly, September 15th, 2020, I'd been building it for 6 months. I put out 10 episodes like at 8 o'clock that night. Just to be like, yo, I'm serious. This isn't like I'm just, I
guess
wanted to
what
show
made you
people
want?
I was
Okay,
serious.
what made you want to even do this? Because you're working on Wall Street, correct, or aspiring to be?
Yeah, somehow I was working on Wall Street. Like,
Suit
what
and tie.
made me want to do
A
this?
suit and tie guy. Interesting.
I mean, I was an only child, so there were a lot of things that had benefits, that had downsides. There were a lot of things I had to figure out myself along the way. And part of it is you also feel the pressure of, like, not that my parents put that pressure on me at all, I want to be clear about that, but you feel the pressure of, like, I need to be good at whatever I do and, like, be a successful person and live my life the right way, the whole bit. So you kind of get into this zone, at least I did, where you just do the next thing. So you get to high school, it's like, all right, let's get good grades. I got to work towards that SAT, try to not be fucking on that, get into a good, sorry, you got to bleep
I
it.
was about to say, I was like, whoa. I was like, did we say that word on your podcast? That's cool.
Yeah, we
Let it
gotta
rip.
bleep
That's
it out every
125,
time.
I guess.
But, it's like you move along, hopefully do pretty well on that, get into a good college, work hard at college, have some fun, but then come out, get a respectable job, the whole bit, and let the rest take care of itself. I never thought about, like, what I want, which is my fault. There's no one else's fault that was. It was my fault. I was just like, I just assumed, like, I should go into finance. That's respectable. So I got hooked up with my guy, Larry Katina, who to this day, love that dude. He is a really successful guy on Wall Street in the private banking industry. And I met him in college through his son, Steve, who is also a good friend of mine to this day. And so he was nice enough to hire me into the kind of role that they don't, in his specific niche, they don't really ever hire people right out of college. But it was like, we got along well, and he's like, we'll figure this out. But in that part of the industry, like wealth management, if you will, like, yeah, a lot of people get hired out of college for that. So the way it worked with where I went was, because Wall Street can mean like a lot of different things, obviously. It was like you come out of college, you grind like a dog for 4 or 5 years, you make no money. But like if you do a good job, then you get a nice offer and you start making money.
Sure.
So I worked really hard. I got to the point where the offer was coming. Larry gave me the offer late summer 2019. And it was if I might say, a very generous offer. Like, it would have changed my life overnight. I would have been a wealthy man. And he was really bringing me into the inner sanctum. Like, everything that he touched, I was now going to touch.
Yeah.
He already kind of did that with me, by the way. But now there was like going to be, I won't go into specifics, but there was going to be business on that as well. Like, it wasn't just going to be like, hey, help me out with this client over here. It's like, you're also like going to be a part of this client too. So it was a really nice offer, but I knew building up to it in my gut probably 2.5 years before that I didn't want to do this. And I knew in the year leading up to it that, like, consciously, that I didn't want to do it because I didn't love it at all. Like, picture me in a fucking bank.
No.
You can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm Mr. not in a suit kind of guy.
The opposite
you know?
of, I would say.
So it's almost like I took a 4 or 5 year hiatus from who I was in some respects, and then like just kind of flipped back, which is cool. But I had been working. Part of the way I figured shit out was about what I wanted was after college, a couple years in, I started to realize like I didn't like this. Like I didn't like banking.
Yeah.
I liked the people I worked with. I just didn't like what we did. So I was fucking around with like side LLCs, doing marketing for people, doing creative strategy for people, whatever. And then Mitch and Mike Laxamana, I started halfway living with them in Jersey City. And they started making me do like little content things, which I never shared shit. The content for me was Snapchat because no one watched it except my friends.
I don't think I've ever seen
and I could do whatever I wanted. You know what I mean? And it was like we could fuck around and make a 40-minute story blacked out and nobody cares. No one's going to know. But, you know, I never did. I was like, who the fuck wants to hear from me? And Mitch and Mike were like, just do it. So they would make me record some shit and then we'd post it on like LinkedIn back when Mitch was interviewing you on LinkedIn, and it would do well. People would reach out like, I don't know who you are or what the fuck you're saying, but I watched that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Didn't think much of it. And then we did some interview work in 2019. We did the Maxwell's in Atlantic City, and then we did the Next Gen Conference in June 2019 in New York City. And I had a knack for it. And I was like, whoa. And so the first interview I did in 2019 at the Maxwell's are like an old football award, right? So they do NFL, college, the whole bit. And it was still down in Atlantic City at the time. And Chaz Servino was his client, the Maxwell, like actual awards. And his other client at the time was Ray Lewis, Hall of Fame linebacker, who was getting the Legends Award that year.
Right.
So I was advising Chaz at the time along with Mitch and Mike. And I was like, why don't we go do content down at the Maxwell's? Because I'm like, let's get Chaz doing content, get him on camera. And so Chaz is like, I'll do it. That's a great idea. Come do it with me, though. And we looked at each other like, fuck yeah, we'll do that. I'm thinking I'm going to be sitting on the side, you know, just helping guide things along a little here and there, not thinking anything of it. And that's what I did the first night. But the second day when they had the press conference in the morning, I get down there at like 10 a.m. and Mitch had like commandeered the back of the press area. He's the best. You know how it is. He's suited up, ready to go. You know, he's got the Maxwell branding behind him. Like we brought a producer there who had like the moving steady cam. I was like, this is next level.
He knows what he's doing.
And I don't even know who he's interviewing. Could have been a guy off the street. He didn't give one flying fuck. So I was like, this is great. And so I go to meet Chaz, who's coming down with Ray Lewis. And Chaz, you know, another Wayne guy. Yeah. Obviously, I'm surrounded by you fucking people. But, you know, I can't even get off camera.
They're all over the place, man.
But, you know, I walk up to him and I go, all right, yo, we got this area of the press room. And he goes, hey, Jules, change your plans. I'm like, what do you mean? He goes, so Ray wants to do a panel with me, him, and this other fucking guy upstairs. Like, I think Ray's marketing guy was there or something. Okay. And we have a camera crew for that. So you're going to do the interviews down here. And I was like, what? No. He's like, you'll do great. And like walks away. So I walk up and Mitch goes, so you're doing them? I'm like,
who are you interviewing?
That's what I'm saying. So Mitch is like, all right, we got Vince Papale first. Like from the movie Invincible. Who Mark Wahlberg played. And I didn't fuck with Vince Papale heavy. I'm like, all right, fuck it. And so I just sit down. We talked for like 22 minutes. I don't know what the fuck happened. I blacked out. My dad was there with like Jim DiOrio, like off camera, just chilling, taking in the weekend. He's like, this is fucking awesome.
You're like, is it?
And so I get up, and Vince Papale, who was the coolest dude ever, by the way, the absolute legend. But he goes, wow, that was great. Like shakes my hand, and I take out my Merrill Lynch business card and give it to him. That was the business card I had. So he takes the business card and he like looks at it, looks at me, and he goes, Merrill Lynch. I go, yeah, it's my day job. And he's like, you should do this. You're good at this. You should do this. I was like, really? He's like, yeah. And he just walked away. I was like, oh, okay. So I walk up to Mitch and I go, all right, are we doing more? He's like, yeah, you got Jeff Munkin next. And I go, who the fuck is Jeff Munkin? And the guy to my right puts out his hand and goes, hi, I'm Coach Jeff Munkin.
Oh,
I'm
no.
like,
You're like, I was joking. Come on.
Yeah, he's like the head coach of Army. He won the coach of the year that year.
Okay.
So Jim Diorio's looking at me like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is
Yeah.
the coach of his alma mater. And so I'm like, Mitch, who the guy sitting down in the chair with the lights and everything. People are waiting. I'm like, who is that? Like, I don't know. I pull up the Wikipedia. I'm like, all right, coach, lived in Kansas. All right, that's good enough. Let's go. All right, coach, sit down, do a half hour with him. And it just flowed. It flowed great.
Wow.
And then we did another one that was really easy. Well, the subject matter wasn't easy, but like the flow of it was really easy with the coach who won like the Humanitarian of the Year award.
Yeah.
His daughter had gone through a lot of stuff, and he and his wife were both there, and it was really good. So I kind of had
You had a knack for this.
I had the knack for it, and I had the itch for it after that. And fast forward to when I was talking about turning down the contract with Larry, it was the end of summer 2019, and Larry's like my guy. And so he did not have to do this, but you know, he kind of saw it coming. I was going to say no, he was still sad, obviously, because we were really tight. But he said, look, you're doing great work for me. It's useful. I would imagine you're trying to change industries now. I'm like, yeah. And he's like, all right, the company's paying you, so they don't have to know. You stay here while you're figuring your shit out so you can pay your bills. Yeah. And then, you know, when you're ready to go, you go, which was so cool. So he does that. And I went on to the job trail and just got my ass kicked.
Why?
I mean, I was a 25-year-old or whatever coming out from banking, which looks fine on a resume, trying to now do creative work. And the only thing,
you didn't jump right into podcasting.
No, I was trying to get. I was applying for jobs that paid $38,000 a year in New York City. Yeah, I was ready to prove my worth. And
That's a loud yeah.
Joe's like, yeah.
He goes, heard that. Heard that.
Shout out Joe Deep.
That was involuntary. He didn't even try saying that.
But yeah, so I was doing that, and I couldn't even get an interview with some of these people. Not because they were like, oh, this guy sucks. It was more like, we don't know how he's a banker. Like, how does this fit? And they could look at a 22-year-old with a marketing degree coming out and know, like, oh, they can do social media.
Right.
I just had side LLC work, and what even is that? So I was getting my ass kicked, and then January 2020, my buddy Ty asked me to come do interview media work for him for his lacrosse company. He was a college lacrosse player, played for Hungary in lacrosse as well, the country. And he's got like a lot of high school, middle school kids. I think there was hundreds at one point that he was like training. And so he's like, we're doing this big event indoors at this warehouse. And at the end, I want you to interview me with the lights and everything. And it'll be content like getting my story out there. So I said, all right. And that day happened to be the day Kobe Bryant died, which was it was a bizarre, the whole day was just bizarre. And we ended up doing it at like 10 o'clock at night after the whole day. I had been around the warehouse the whole day with him. And we sit down, all the lights go on, so everything else is dark. And we go back and forth on his story for like 30 minutes or whatever it was. And, you know, he really wanted to talk about all of it, including some of the stuff that was more of like a learning example for the other kids, like mistakes he had made. And so at the end, you know, the lights go on, and there was like 30, 35 people that were still there. And they were like clapping or whatever. I was like, oh, shit. And so a lot of people came up to me, and they're like, bro, do you have a podcast? And I had heard this before, but I'm like, no, who the fuck wants to listen to me? I don't have a podcast. And they're like, you need a podcast. So there were like enough people that said that I drove home. It was in South Jersey, so I had to drive back home to North Jersey that night for a couple hours. And I drove home in silence. I was thinking about the day because like Kobe was a Philly legend, someone I grew up watching. And I was like, you know, I was getting my ass kicked on the job trail. Like I said, I'm like, you know, if I did a podcast, I would need to do it right. So I'd need the right equipment, all this. Not thinking about anything. Sure. Mind you, I got no fucking money. Yeah. No, like literally. I mean, if I showed you my old apartment, there was like oil leaks from the ceiling, and I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, it's fine. That'll cost money. Probably took like 10 years off my life living in that place. But I just went home, and I made it my Saturday afternoon hobby to go to B&H Photo and learn about everything. Yep. So then I hit the order button on equipment with money I don't have on March 4th, I think. And then, if you remember, I'm still working on Wall Street. The world started to end. Yeah. Because it was COVID. Mm-hmm. So we get like held up on that because we got clients freaking out. And I totally forget about it. But March 13th, first day of quarantine, I get the notification like, your equipment has arrived downstairs. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I can't believe I did that. So I go get the equipment. I bring it up to my fucking apartment. I sit it on the couch. And I'm like, oh my God, all my job opportunities just dried up overnight because the world's ending. And I just spent whatever money I had on this stupid fucking equipment. Like, Julian, this is the stupidest shit you have ever done in your life. And then I don't know if it was like 30 seconds or 60 seconds, whatever it was. I just looked at it. And then I said, well, I guess I got to do it now. I guess I got to go for this. And so I got 2 phone calls over the next few days. First one, I don't remember which one was first. I always tell it each way, but they were like almost the same day. One of them was my boss. And he was like, I take it all your job opportunities just dried up overnight.
You're like,
I was
no.
like, yes, because I was going to be leaving officially
yeah.
no matter what on March 31st. And he goes, listen, at that point, they were thinking we're going to be back in the office in like 2 months. So he's like, just we got everything under control because we really did. Like, he did an unbelievable job leading into the pandemic. Our clients were good by like the 16th. We were set. It's not like we were sitting there like, yeah, we don't have to do anything. But it was almost like, all right, we're watching this every day, but everyone's in a great position.
Yeah.
People have mitigated downside risk. Like, everything looked great. And he's like, dude, just hang in there until we go to the office and then you can leave. I was like, oh, great. So I can pay my bills. Then my dad calls me. And this is when they're saying like 2 weeks to stop the curve. So if you remember that.
Wow.
So my dad goes, this is going to be a year. And I was like, what, Malaka? They're saying 2 weeks to stop the curve. He's like, no, this is going to be a year. My lease was April 1st. He's like, do not resign your lease. Come down to South Jersey. And so I'm like, all right, say less.
Where were you prior to going back
I was
home?
living in Morristown.
Right.
Yeah.
This is probably around the time you called me and said, this is going to change the world forever. And I was like, fucking whack job.
It would have been after.
I was like, I knew Jim was crazy, but like, this guy's a fucking nut. I was like, all right, dude, I got to go. And I remember thinking about it, I was like, wow, he was kind of right. Because I thought you were like doomsday prepping. And I'm like, all right, it's always better to be on that side than not. And then I kept seeing these things come out in the news. And I was like, hey, what were you talking about? This whole thing was going to change the world forever. You're like, I fucking told you. And it ended up happening.
It was weird, but my dad was on it. So, I went down there. I went back down to my parents' house April 1st. And when I got there, he saw the equipment. And he was like, what the fuck is that?
Oh.
And I was like, I mean, you can see my dad. Like, he didn't know. He didn't even know what a podcast was. And I was like, it's just some podcast equipment. And he's like, well, he pointed to the back room. And he's like, go for it. So I built a studio back there. And they let me do that. I would have never been. I've always said this. The podcast feels like it's half my parents too, because I would have never been able to do this if they didn't let me move back in and host it there. Like, straight up, I could have never afforded that rent and the health problems I was having before the pandemic that then just got way worse. Like, my original plan was to move out of their house 3 months after starting the podcast.
Yeah.
When I thought I was going to be okay, and get a job like bartending to pay bills, to have rent on a studio, and just have a 5-year window.
Yeah.
And then I realized that physically that wasn't going to be possible. I couldn't really work on like a schedule, like with any type of job that involved me moving around, just because I wasn't in good
You were
shape.
that banged up, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's how it happened. I built it in silence for 6 months, didn't tell anybody about it. And then, I launched in September, like we were saying, put out 10 episodes and got moving. And now we should bring Alessi in, because I met Alessi 3 months in a Lex Friedman comment section.
Go on, please.
So I was, at this time, I just was in my 3rd year of college, and I was like, all right, I was doing pre-med, and I thought I was going to become a doctor. My parents are doctors. I'm going to go follow this route. This is going to be what I'm going to do.
This is
and
crazy.
After
He would have been a shit doctor.
Thank God you're over here.
After 7 failed OChem exams, I finally was like,
7?
7 in a row. I just kept thinking this is my persistency and stubbornness, where I was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And I kept failing. And my friends were like, bro, this degree, I don't think is for you. I'm like, I got it. I just got to get to med school and I'll be okay. And I wasn't putting one and one together. And then finally I was like, dude, this ain't for me. I got to do something different. So I shifted to a minor in entrepreneurship with my pre-med. And at that time I was like, dude, what should I do? Because these classes of entrepreneurship are like telling you like, this is what you do when you have a business and you venture capitalists and all these things. And I'm like, well, you need a business. Like, I need to do something.
Yeah.
So at this time, like, I had just found Joe Rogan 2 years ago. It was 2018, 2017.
Thank you.
Funny enough, the first ever podcast I found him was Dan Bilzerian. That was like the first ever one.
I mean, I think that's a
And,
lot
like,
of guys.
it popped
that
off,
age.
and
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
just, I was like, dude, Dan Bilzerian, I know this guy. Who's this Joe Rogan? And I was like, damn, this is cool.
Yeah.
And I was like, I remember thinking like 3 hours. I'm like, bro, I don't have time for that. This
Yes.
is crazy. And then I remember driving, and what happened, it was like, it went by so fast. I was like, dude, this guy's onto something. So I was like, you know what? I should start a podcast and just talk to locals in my area. And I was like, I need equipment. So I was like, who's a big podcaster? Lex Friedman. So I went into a comment section, and I never do this. Like, I never will just go into a comments and be like, hey, does anybody know what the equipment is? But I was just like, what's going to happen? Let me just see. So I put a comment being like, hey, what equipment does he use? And then behold, this guy sends me a DM, not
No
just
way.
one, sends me 20 messages with like, this is what you need. This is the
I was
audio.
high as fuck.
This is the microphones. This is the mixer. Every single thing I listen. I'm like, dude, who is this guy? And I'm like looking. And I'm like, this guy's a podcast. I'm like, let me give it a courtesy listen. See what it's
A
about.
courtesy listen is crazy. Oh, buddy, here's your like, man.
Yeah, I'm like,
here's
let
your
me-
comment.
I
Good job
wrote-
today.
Yo, also, he gave the courtesy listen like 3 months later.
yeah, right. Like a 5-second view.
Yeah, no, he waited 90 days, and one day was like, all right.
All right,
No,
fine.
so I listened
Fine.
to it, and I was just like, oh wow, like this guy's really good. Like comparing
Yeah.
him to Rogan, I'm like, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm like, I wonder how many subscribers. And it was like 64. I'm like, there's no way. And I remember because we had our Snapchats at this point because we were texting, and I sent him a video being like, dude, you are unbelievable. You're gonna be the next Joe Rogan. This is crazy. I can't believe no one's found you. And then he was
You're like, thanks, I know.
I turned my phone around to my mom. I'm like, look at this idiot.
He actually believes in me.
He was like
Idiot.
literally like underscore thanks. And I was like, trust me.
I was nicer than that.
So we then started texting back and forth, and like I was watching his podcast, and I like honestly, like I swear to you, I couldn't believe he wasn't bigger. I that was the mindset. I was like, this guy, like I cannot believe he doesn't have more subscribers.
Right.
And I was just like convinced. I'm like, this guy's gonna take off. There's no question. And then he started having more guests at this point, and he was like having friends and stuff. And then it wasn't until that next summer in my life where I was in Miami now. I left college in California, and I was like, dude, I need to go somewhere else completely because California shut down. It's terrible. There's nothing you can do. So I went to Miami, and during this time, I'm like, I'm just gonna have to find some completely different job. So I was working at a CrossFit gym.
Oh, right.
And I wasn't making anything. I was having a good time. That's where I met my wife and everything. And I was like, dude, like you start having that impending thought being like, what's next? What's next? What's next? I'm like, I'm not going to work at a gym forever. This is not my goal, the horizon. And I was texting Julian on the side during this time. And I was like, dude, I wonder what's going to happen there. And, you know, we were kind of like teasing, like, what's the future? Like, where are you seeing yourself going? And like flat out from day one, he's like, I want to become the biggest podcast. Like he said that since day one. And I was like, okay. And then it was like slowly growing more and more. And then when did you hit 100,000?
Well, that kind of happened over in December 2000 or 2021
Yes.
is when YouTube started to take. TikTok
Yes.
had been booming. but
Yes.
YouTube took it, and then
Exactly. So I saw that and I'm like, look, this guy's going to take off. I know it. And I'm like, I want to ride that high.
Yeah,
Let
I
me
don't
go
blame
with
you.
that.
take
I
them
believe it.
coattails.
Yeah,
I'll ride the
exactly.
coattails.
Yeah.
And then we had a conversation because I had then at this point, our mutual friend James Fox, the UFO documentarian, I had him on my podcast. And like that was a thing where he should have never done that. You know, I had a podcast that was like abysmal. Like there was no following, nothing. But James is the type of guy where he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah,
He's like,
yeah.
podcast,
This is the best
marketing,
ones.
this is amazing. And he accepted my podcast conversation. And we had the conversation. At the end of it, I was like, it was in the moment. And I was like, I'm going to ask him if I can go on the next UFO documentary trip with him. And I asked him. And at this time, he hadn't told anyone what he was doing. He's like, I'm going to Brazil. There's a UFO crash. There were live beings. And I'm like, I'm there.
I'm in.
Sold.
Wait,
sold.
what?
Yes.
Yeah, he was in Moment of Contact.
Yeah.
Alessi was a producer on that.
Wait, you've met an alien.
No.
No, but
So they're
he's met
fake.
people who have met
So there,
an alien.
so there are no
Exactly.
such thing as aliens.
It's
Right.
complicated.
Tell him the story. Let's.
So long.
into it.
So yeah. So
We
what
got
ends up-
time. Don't worry.
So what ends up happening is I asked him to go on this trip, and he was like, you know what? Yeah, you have my number. You know, just text me, and we can figure something out.
Yeah, sure.
And I was, again, this is my stubborn persistence. I text him every month, beginning of the month. I was like, yo, what's the update on the trip? What's the update on the trip? And sometimes he'd respond, and sometimes he wouldn't. And then finally, he hit me up. Actually, this goes back to June real quick. The timeline here where I was like, hey, you know, we were talking. He's like, dude, you know, once this thing takes off, I'd love for you to be the producer. And I was like, great. I have a plan. I know where I'm going now. I had some comfort.
Awesome.
And at that same time, a month later, James hit me up out of the blue, and he was like, "Hey, August, we're going to Brazil. Buy your flights. I'll take care of everything." And I was like, sold. So I bought the flights, and then I showed up, and he couldn't believe I was there.
Yeah, James later
Like,
said,
oh my
"I
God,
thought
okay.
I'd never see him again." And then he showed up. He's like, "Oh my God!"
Holy shit,
Literally,
it's
I was in the hotel, and then I was
It's like kicking people out of another room.
I was-
This is your room.
literally,
Welcome.
I was in the lobby waiting, and then I just see him. I'm like, I know that face. I'm like, James, I'm Alessi, and he's like, "Oh my gosh,
You're like,
welcome.
you made it.
Let me show you your room." And then we go to the room, and one of the other people were staying there, and he's like,
Stop.
"We're gonna get them out. You'll stay here."
Fuck out.
No way.
You didn't know
You're
I was
VIP.
coming. You had no
He's
idea.
literally like, "Yeah, this is your room.
Get the
Yeah,
I'll tell you later.
And then he's like, "Wait, how long are you here for?" I'm like, "I'm here for the 3 weeks." And he's like, "The 3 weeks, cool. All right, cool. We're gonna make this work." And the other place, we
way.
don't have an extra bed. Can you sleep on the floor? And I'm like, "Dude, I don't care. I just want to be here." So I'm there for 3 weeks. We go do the entire UFO documentary. Him and I get close, and then I'm like telling Julian, like, "This is a guy you got to have on your podcast."
Right.
He only went on Joe Rogan once at that point. And at that first podcast he was on, he didn't really talk.
It was with Jacques Vallée.
Jacques Vallée was the main guy, and he's
Yeah.
the guy that was based off the character in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters.
Yep.
So he was the
World-famous
focus.
physicist.
And he was kind of off the side, and I was like, "Who's this documentarian guy? Like, he sounds very smart and knows what he's doing." So I was telling June, I'm like, no one's done a proper podcast with him, and like has not asked him about his 25 years of experience. This dude's been doing UFO research since 1992 or 3, and has footage going all the way back then, and it's like crazy.
If it doesn't work in a podcast.
I know. I keep.
We're used
taking
to
away.
headphones, man. I'm helping.
get it.
Yeah. And then so what ends up happening is we do the trip, we come back, and then I fly up to do your podcast in January of 2022. And then
Episode 85.
and we talk about my whole experience there. So if you want to hear about the whole UFO experience, I don't remember what I said exactly, but all the details are there.
I want to know right now, are they real or not? That's all I care about.
Oh, dude, it's so complicated. So
And you're a Christian, so I'm very curious. what
yeah,
your
so
opinion is.
all right. I'll preface it as this. From that trip, I became more of a Christian.
Wow. So
Yes.
they're not real. Thank you.
No. They are.
That's not what he's saying.
Oh.
No,
He's a
they're-
biblical aliens Jesus guy.
this is all over the place.
So, because I was so fascinated by the topic of aliens, obviously, like, are there other beings? That's the biggest question. You'll have the smart asses that'll tell you, of course, they're in the ocean, they're microscopic, or
Sure.
they're on the moon. And so, like, whatever you define as aliens like that, sure. But, like, we're talking about actual beings, creatures that can think and, communicate all those things. And there are actual cases which I believe 100% happen.
Why do you
What?
believe it?
Because the cases of the people, where you hear there's so much corroborating information. You have people that were like the Zimbabwe case in '94, where there was over 60 school children that saw a UFO land and saw an alien come out, and at the same time is communicating with the kids telepathically. All 60 kids have the same story. And these are kids that are like 6 to 10 years old.
Children.
They're children. So why would they be lying? All 60 of them. And then at the same time, you have cases like this Virginia in 1996, where there's a UFO crash, and there's a guy that saw the UFO crash, and there's people in the town of Virginia who are saying they saw creatures, and then you have police and military of the Brazilian military coming in, and you're hearing about bodies, and you're hearing about doctors examining, like, all these stories around the same time, where it's like, either this is just one big hoax and they're just lying to you, or something actually happened. Now, what the actual being is your question, right?
Yes.
And a lot of Christians, they start shaking in their boots when they hear it, because they're thinking, this is going to disprove religion. This is going to prove that there isn't any actual Jesus or whatever. And for me, I never had that experience, because people like to quote Ezekiel and being like, oh, there's the saucer in the sky in Ezekiel, and because of that, there's UFOs. That's what Tim Burchett always quotes, and he's the Republican from Tennessee. He's always like, that's why they're real. I'm like, all right, dude, like, that's what you think.
Yeah.
But I've always believed in, and I'll bring it out of the Christian perspective to the scientific, the multiverse theory. That's one and one are the same, in my belief.
Whoa.
Because of the fact that there's spiritual dimensions.
Sure.
That is what the multiverse is saying. Scientists won't say, though, it is spiritual.
Yeah.
But they'll imply, like, is it possible that there could be a podcast like this happening right now? But my name's John Rondi, your name's Alessi, and your name's Julian, right?
Yeah.
I believe that, but maybe not to that extent. But I believe it in the sense that there is a spiritual realm. Like, right now, there are angelic beings, we'll call it.
Sure.
Whatever colloquial term you want to use.
Are they hot?
They better be. He's like, come on, dude, grow up.
And
He's got to deal. This poor kid has to deal with it.
Yeah.
always the side remarks, just like boop.
You're like, oh, anyway.
So getting to your question
Yeah.
is, yes, I believe there's aliens, but one of the books that really put this in perspective was this guy, Dr. Michael Heiser. And he was a Christian who was attending all these MUFON UFO like conferences in Vegas and stuff. And he was accounting all these cases as well as just talking to researchers. And what they came to find was, and again, do I believe 100% what he thinks? Not necessarily, but I think his research does show a testament to what the faith is, and it helps a lot of believers. And what he said was almost all these UFO sightings, all these things, there was this weird thing that happened in all these cases, and there's no MUFON researcher who has yet to address this, but this is universal, that whenever there's been a quote-unquote UFO sighting, or if there's been a quote-unquote abduction or whatever, and people call in the name of Jesus Christ, they always end.
What do you mean? Always end.
They stop.
The
sightings, the actual, all of it ends. So
Whoa.
that many people will imply that and being that, oh, these are demonic.
Right.
But I don't even think it's demonic. Like, yes, there could be demonic spirits that the aliens are seeing in that. But then you also have to look at the translations and what these telepathic communications are saying.
Whoa.
And some of them are a bit universal. And this is where it becomes a little Alex Jones's, but it's true, because if you look at the Bible, what is the Tower of Babel? The Tower of Babel story is the story where everyone was together and they're having the same language, they have the same belief in everything. What do they want to do? They want to build a tower to the gods, and they want to build it to God, so they all start working together. So what does God do? He's like, I'm going to curse you guys. You all have different languages, different cultures. You can't interact with each other, because the Bible is against universality. The God doesn't want you to be all one. That's not his whole thing. You know, if you have a question about that, that's a debate with the theologists. Right. I can't answer that. But essentially, all these sightings promote this idea of we need to become one. We need to have a one world bank. We need to have a one world religion, a one world government. And you see these in the sightings. They all say this. And that is very counter to what the Bible talks about.
What, and you don't need to quote it verbatim, but like, where does it and how does it say that?
So it will say it, if you look at Revelations, it talks about it a lot. I can't remember the quotes,
Yeah,
but
that's fine.
They talk about it over and over again in the stories where it's like, look, there's good and evil.
Sure.
God created it, so there's both of those spheres. There's no such thing as almost like socialism. There's no such thing as equality across the spectrum. There's no utopia. The idea to strive for it is wrong, biblically speaking. That's never going to happen. It just won't. That's just the sense of the world. You know, you have places like North Korea, you have places like Iraq, and these regions where you have horrible dictators. Evil is a very real thing, and this will get to something that you like, is Bustamante, the CIA spy.
Correct. That's what I was exactly thinking about.
I know Julian has different feelings about it, but his whole idea of, you know, human beings are terrible and evil.
Right. I'm happy you brought this up. Please continue.
Yeah. So
because I skew your side a little more.
So he says it in a very harsh sense, but
Yes, he does.
essentially, if you're a Christian, you believe in the same sense. What he's saying, he's just saying, as people, we are rotten sinners. We're just bad people.
Right.
And how are we redeemed through Jesus Christ? That's what he's saying.
Do you think that's a semantics argument, though? Meaning you say it like that as a Christian because it's like we're flawed, whereas he's saying it like, no, y'all fucking suck.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of his personal experience in there. But
Has to be.
But what he's saying is true, though. We're not good people. And you can get into the argument being that, all right, what if the billionaire gives all his money away to charity and is helping for people in poverty, right? You think of that argument where it's like, what about all that good? He's a good person.
Bill Gates.
Yeah. And it's,
Pause. He just did that.
He's done some good.
By that standard.
He's done some good.
No comment.
Some.
And so you take that argument, but when you really think down to it, are you really a good person? Yeah, that billionaire gave so much money, but what about all the things? What is considered a bad thing?
That I think the issue that we're dealing with right now is good versus bad, and the reason it's called a temptation is because it's easy to succumb to that temptation. So yes, his ideology of humans are innately bad because we innately want to be doing what's quote unquote bad, right? That's why it's called a temptation. My temptation is to lust over women.
Yeah.
But I fight that temptation and live the way I know I'm supposed to live, which is being monogamous and finding one partner, whatever that kind of looks like for you. And so just because we're innately supposed to be doing one thing and we do the other, I don't think that necessarily makes us bad. I just think we're more aware of what we're supposed to be doing that's deemed good versus bad.
And I think there's levels of it. I agree with you, but I also say the default is you're bad, no matter what.
Yeah, and
I
don't
always succumb to that.
And I don't mind that argument, but I think like you were saying, his world, unfortunately, through his perspective, has been a lot of bad. Now, hypothetically, if you were somebody that grew up wherever and you never really saw the things that he saw, and let's assume that you didn't have social media. I remember, like he was saying, the donkey video. Just like, all right, man, that wasn't that big of a deal. Like, relax. You've definitely seen way worse. I was like, all right, did you see it? I was like, all right, you've seen way worse. I remember when I was on YouTube at a young age, I saw a guy, and it's like a regular farmer looking dude, and he was like in the camera, he didn't know what he was about to do. And he has like his chicken with him, and I was like, okay, that's cool.
Oh no.
And he takes down his pants, starts fucking this chicken. I was like, and that for me was the donkey video. And I was like, that just scarred me, and I will never be the same for the rest of my life. And now you start doubling that down with, you mentioned the website that has like the 10 layers of whatever.
Oh, I thought you were going to talk about the grapefruit technique.
No, that also, yeah.
I had to explain to him what the grapefruit technique was the other night.
So again, a video that really imprinted into my brain. Anyway, so let's assume that you were never exposed to these things. You would never even know. Like if you just grew up and were taught the good in the world, then you'd have the opposite perspective as he does. So it kind of is like your upbringing. I think that's like the goal of a family, is like you want to raise your children to believe, no, you're supposed to want one partner and not to sleep with a bunch of different women. No, you're supposed to help one another and love one another. If that's what you're brought up doing, then like your assumption would be that's what I'm supposed to do. And you wouldn't have this innate feeling of I want to go do bad.
I think yes, but it's the degree of what is bad.
That's
Because the worst
issue,
thing
right.
someone does is the worst thing someone does.
Correct.
If the worst thing I do is I steal some gum from
Sure.
the gas station right here,
Yeah.
that's, quote, still bad.
Right.
Or maybe I have a bad thought, but that's all I ever do. That's still bad. But his is like, I've seen African warlords abusing kids.
Yeah, exactly.
To Jesus, like in the Bible, all sins are the same. It doesn't matter. They're
don't
all
like
on the
that.
same playing field.
I don't like
So it's
that.
like you do one thing wrong, you do them all. It doesn't matter. So because of that default, we are all bad. That's the belief.
But I don't like that. Because that's bullshit.
Well,
I'm
we're
just
all
being
si-
honest.
we're
I'm
all-
just
we're
being
all-
honest. Like if you steal, I mean, you shouldn't steal gum from the gas station, but like on my morality high ground, that's a lot better than, you know, the African warlord guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's got to be levels to this game.
Yeah, I see. I know what you're saying, but to his eyes, he's like, the whole point is you are imperfect. You
Correct,
make
yeah.
mistakes no matter what. So to equate what is good or what you do is good, you're going to have bad, and you are sinners. You're going to make mistakes constantly. Because of those things, no matter what, you have to believe in him and be transformed. But that's why Bustamante says the world is run by the devil. And I believe that. Again,
His analogy was great. His analogy when he said, for those that didn't listen to Bustamante for the third time on Julian's podcast, please
It
go
was a
listen to
lot
it.
more than the third time.
Fourth time, fifth time, whatever. He was on it. He was on a lot, but this one I'm hooked on. And the analogy he gave, I've never heard before. He said, the devil is like a Rottweiler. The earth is the Rottweiler's ball, but God has the Rottweiler by a leash.
Right.
And your job is to not allow the devil in and to allow the devil to play with you, quote unquote, for your life. And you have to surrender. And I think the point that you're making, not trying to make, is that we're all sinners but one. And that one was not just the man, he was also God in Jesus Christ. So that kind of gives you like the moral guideline of how you should be living. And I think to Julian's point also, it doesn't seem fair that because I stole a piece of gum, I'm on the same playing field as a Hitler of the world. You know, that doesn't, it's hard for me to kind of process in my brain, but like the dying thief on the cross that he says, I'm now a believer in Christ, I get to go to heaven.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have with Christianity, but it's one of those things where I'm not smarter than God and I can't go against what the Bible says.
It comes to a point where it's like there's a mystery to the Bible of
There
like
is.
what comes next, what's going to happen. He reveals little pockets and little things, but things like that where it's like a lot of people wouldn't like to hear this, but if Hitler on his dying breath is like, Jesus, will you redeem me? He's going to be saved.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are going to be like, how the hell can that happen? But it's like, Jesus knows your heart.
He has to mean it, Julian. He's got to like in his heart.
In his heart.
Not
That's
just
the
words.
thing. It's like,
That's the difference too.
But would
Because
he
God
do
knows.
it though?
exactly. It comes down
When
to it.
you've
It's
gone
like,
that far.
Maybe
do
Kanye
you
thought he
really
had it in
think-
his heart.
Oh,
He
no,
did.
That
Well, he
man-
did at one point.
Apparently.
It comes down to it where it's like none of us can understand like how we truly are, of like deep down. Like, do we truly believe this?
Yeah.
And like that gets where a lot of Christians are stuck in this loop thinking like, am I saved? Am I not saved? But that, example of being if Hitler on his dying breath said that, if he truly believes in his heart that he believes in Jesus and he can be redeemed, then he will be. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear that, but that's the just game of what God plays by.
Yeah, and it's and we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of debating Christianity and religion. I think the opposite case is true too. It's hard to grasp the concept of if somebody lived a close to perfect life, but the only thing they did not do was denounce Jesus Christ as the Lord and Savior, that person now lives eternity in hell, whereas Adolf Hitler is now in heaven having a great time.
That's a great example, yeah.
And there's a lot of questions that are going to be unknown forever, and I think that's the beauty of the religion is that when we do pass over, all those questions are to be answered. And I think there's, time doesn't exist in that moment. And think about, I was talking about yesterday with somebody that's also Christian, but taking religion aside from this conversation, just like the laws of energy are so unknown to human beings, but they're all very real, right? The way somebody makes you feel because they're just a good person, right? We can't understand and put that into words why that's happening, the energy exchange, or why if we're competing at something, the feeling of happiness I get when I win is the literal opposite of the feeling of sadness that you feel when you lose.
Yeah.
There's an energy exchange there, and we can't put that into words, but like that just is how it is. So there's so much to learn on this earth that like, why are you wasting your time learning nonsense? And I think that's one of those things with religion. Why would you not err on the side of believing in Jesus Christ? I don't know. That's how I feel. Like you might as well believe in Jesus if the alternative is not believing in Jesus. And God forbid this is real, this whole heaven and hell thing. And now you die and you're like, oh man, if only I denounced Jesus as the Lord and Savior.
What made you start asking these questions? Because when we first knew each other, this never came up. Yeah. But now in recent years it has. So I'm curious what sparked that.
Yeah, it's a good question, man. I'm definitely an overthinker. Like I need answers. I need answers to I'm not just gonna let you say this is why it is. But what ended up happening for me was like I constantly needed answers to my questions to the point of like no return, where I was never satisfied. And I said it to maybe the pastor I had on, Chris. I was like, Jesus Christ be sitting in that chair right there in his form.
That's Joey Deef.
But that's not Jesus, it's Joey Deef. So whatever. We got the second best thing. we got JD instead. I would still make a reason up as to why that's not Jesus Christ, right? I have the answer right there and I'm still questioning it. So for me, the feeling of surrendering and letting go felt so good that, I still like to question things and I like to understand, but the belief that like some things are just never going to be answered and to put my belief in one thing, like here's the guideline of how to live life. You should probably go follow that guideline, made everything else kind of a lot easier because every question I had made a lot more sense. Like, why is this not happening to me? Or why do I feel jealousy towards that person? And the answers are kind of pretty clear if you just sit back and listen. And I was listening to what you guys were saying, both the feedback you were getting and the feedback you were getting, obviously two opposite sides of the feedback loop, but the world or God speaks to you. You just got to listen. So the feedback you were getting pre-podcast was this guy should be a podcaster. And guess what? You should have been, and you are now. This guy should not be in STEM. Well, guess what? If you listened, which you eventually did, he was right, or the world was right. The feedback was right.
Universe lining up.
It does. It always does. You put yourself, and I think that's the beauty of social media in a weird way is like, you'll know very quick if something works, if it doesn't. Yeah. Even if it's 5 comments or 1 comment. If somebody that was a stranger that did not know you watched your video and said, hey, you're pretty good at this. That person had no reason to lie. Let's assume, right?
Facts.
So why not listen to him? Right. This random guy
we never go into comment sections either. The two of us, and we happen to do that night. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy? You both were under the impression like I'm not going to read comments, and you happen to read one comment. This random dude was like, "Yo, you're gonna be the next Joe Rogan," and you're like, "Yeah, I kind of know."
He also has the same birthday as me.
That's weird.
That was weird as fuck. Like there were a lot of little weird things, and I appreciate your answer because I do think there's a part of it where these things you can't explain in the universe lining up. You go the one way and say maybe it's all simulation. Okay, I've entertained that before. Rizverk's a smart guy. Or, there's some higher meaning to that. But what I'm hearing in your answer is that it's interesting. It kind of starts from a place of overthinking and kind of putting everything together in your life. But beneath that, correct me if I'm wrong here, there's also, it's like you're not 20 anymore. So you're getting a little older, a little more mature. You're thinking about what's important. And there's like, there was almost maybe a gap there of like, what is the point of me doing all these things? I'm successful. I do well. I have a lot of friends, but like, what does it all mean? And now you kind of get to the answer you're at now. And a part of it you find in religion.
That's, yeah, very, very on point. I think the other thing is too, like when I look at other people and I look at who I would be proud of if that was me, right? For an example, and I'm not saying I live the way these people live, but when I look at guys, and for whatever reason, when I hear somebody's a Christian, I feel different warmth in the energy of the room. And when somebody lives by the way that Jesus teaches us how to live, being monogamous, being loving to your neighbors, loving to other people, and giving back, and all these different things, I'm like, that's a great person. Whereas the opposite happens, and now I'm 29, whereas like when you're 17, 18, the guys that are driving the fast cars, get laid all the time, like you're like, that's so cool. And now I look at these guys, I'm like, you just can't fight your urge. Like you're just giving into temptation. That's not cool at all. It's actually the opposite of cool. You're kind of a lame for doing those things, and you think you're cool for it. So I try to put myself in the shoes of the other perspective, and how would people view me if I did these things? Now, the other problem is like, I know I give into temptation sometimes, and I'm like, fuck, I'm not living the way I want myself to be living. And so now you have this like limbo stage, and maybe for me, and I remember you asked Bustamante, is like, when you were saved by Christ, I don't necessarily feel like it was a slap in the face moment where I said, aha. And that's why I live in this guilt stage where I still live relatively the same as I once did. But back then I had no guilt. I was having a great time. I could do whatever the fuck I wanted. There was no moral code.
Yeah.
Now I have this moral code. I do these bad things. And now I stay up at night and I'm like, I fucking suck.
John's like ripping a line of blow, like, damn it,
I'm like, fuck, this was so cool back in the day. Yeah. Let's talk this was way easier.
Oh, he put it here. Relax.
This was way easier back in the day when I had no guilty conscience. Now I just have guilt. So it's like, I believe that this guilt is a good thing because it is transformative, and one day, and it's happening, of course, it's like you're going to be tired of the same bullshit and waking up the same feeling. And I think the best thing that God gives us is like this grace of, you could feel like you're the worst human being in the world, but guess what? That feeling will fade and gives you another chance. Maybe it's the next day, maybe it's the next week, maybe it's in a year, but he will give you the chance to set yourself back, reevaluate what you're doing, and then make a decision. Do you want to go back to those choices and do the bad things that you were doing if you know they lead to you feeling like shit, or do you want to change your life?
Yeah.
So maybe that's why.
Yeah.
But I'm curious how you feel, because you're very analytic as well. And you've had a lot of people on your podcast that are devout Christian. And I know you
Had a lot of everything.
You have. And that's why I'm very curious, like your stance. I know you believe there's a higher power, but you don't, like, let me ask you the question then. How do you feel?
I'm open-minded on stuff. I have my opinions. Actually, this guy Lee Cronin came in, chemist, physicist, genius, and he total like ball breaker, like right off the bat, like walks through the door like he's lived there his whole life. Like, anyway, all right, we're in here. All right, cool. Like, starts just ripping all these opinions off. I'm like, damn. And one of the things he said is that I have strong opinions loosely held. And I was like, I think I know what that means, but explain that. And he goes, it means I'll give you the strongest opinion in your face. I'll call you every name under the book if you disagree with me. But when someone brings me better evidence, I'll switch on a dime. Huh. And so I thought about that, and I'm like, well, I'm not as, I guess, like callous as him about it or whatever, but like I'll have strong opinions on certain things, and then a lot of moderate opinions that I hold pretty strongly on other stuff. That's pretty much actually everything right there. But like I'll hold these opinions and be like, no, that's what it is. That said, if people bring me better evidence, I'll change my mind. I've changed my mind on my own show publicly many, many times. So I ask people about it because also I think it's something that gives people great peace. Like I think one of the worst things about religion to me is the fact that unfortunately there's so few who use it so badly for power purposes that they then bastardize it for everyone else who uses it for the best part. Someone could have some sort of religious belief, X, Y, and Z, believe, like the fucking tooth fairies, like God or whatever. Sure. But like if they're the nicest person and that helps bring them peace and give their life meaning and they treat everyone great, then that's the greatest thing ever. I think that's awesome. Right? So that's why I ask people about it. And I get all different answers. I get people who are purely agnostic, purely atheist, purely Christian, purely believe in Islam, pure Judaism. Like we've had everything in there. But for me, I technically grew up Catholic and everything, right? I don't feel any sort of kinship towards that church, which I know Alessi and I have talked about this. Like a lot of Christians these days don't feel that way because of certain reasons, for sure. But you know, I don't know what I don't know, and so I'm very, very personally against suddenly being like, yes, this is it. What I would rather do, like I'm a flawed guy like everyone else. I make mistakes. I do the wrong shit sometimes. I do my best to do the right shit. I do my best to treat people and things the way I want to be treated when people aren't looking, you know, which is, I think that's like the most important thing in life. But I believe if I live my life the right way, do good things, not just for the sake of doing good things to get a point, but do good things because that's the right thing to do, and do more good than bad, and try to limit what I do where I make mistakes, and understand that I had such a small possibility in the like trillions of a percentile of actually existing that I was able to exist on this little rock in space that we are spinning right here, and therefore I got to use it to the best of my ability for the short time I'm here. It's like if I do that and believe that there is some sort of higher power, no matter what that looks like, who I'm going to have to answer to in some multiverse or whatever it might be after I'm done on this earth, like I'm going to live everything I can the best way because I'm humble in the idea of not knowing what I don't know, and knowing at least that I'm probably going to have to answer to something like that, or believing that at least. So whether or not that means I subscribe to insert your organized religion here or not, that doesn't matter a lot to me right now. But I also think when you look at these religions, there are figures within them that regardless of whether they were exactly what people say they were people to emulate. Like when people talk about Jesus, sounds like the fucking homie, bro. Like,
sounds like
my man was leading people around. He was like a carpenter. He's real humble and shit. You know, supposedly sacrificed his life for everyone else. I think, for one, that's great, you know, and had like a lot of great teachings. Maybe those miracles happened. Maybe they didn't. I'm open to them having happened, though. You know what I mean? There's people that are like black or white on this stuff. It's like, all right, that defies the law of physics. I don't know about walking on water, but maybe, you know? The whole thing's, it's very fascinating to me. So we talk about it on the podcast with different people who have different perspectives on it, and I hear them out. And that's really that.
I think that's the biggest issue with people that think like us, that it's hard for us to have a definitive answer on any one thing, right? Like a devout Christian, like you said, we refuse to believe anything else but what's written in the Bible. So if it's written in the Bible, it exists and it is true. Whereas like someone like you and me, you could be super confident this is the answer to that question. But then as soon as you have somebody on the podcast and you're arguing that and you're very opinionated and you're good at your opinion because you have feedback and you have information kind of back that up. But as soon as they give you a different perspective, you start thinking again. So it's great that you're a thinker, but that's what makes religion so hard for you. Is because I bet if you spent a year with a Buddhist, that Buddhist would be pretty convincing and be like, man, maybe this is the right religion. So it's hard because if you surround yourself with Christians your entire life, and that's why it's a lot easier for people that are born into this, you'd be like, what are you talking about? Of course gravity exists. Of course this religion exists. I'm not even thinking twice about it. Whereas people like us, and for me especially, is like, yeah, I believe it now, but I was raised and not really raised to believe it. So now I have all these different questions in my head. And if you bring up a good point of being agnostic or atheist, I'm like, fuck, like what do I do with that information? I've heard, what's the guy, probably the most famous dude on any sort of social that is Christian, Cliff. Yeah. So he's great, right? He's great. But I've also heard him say, he makes it a point where he's like, he gets asked a question that's a hard-hitting question. He's like, I don't know.
That's
like,
important.
That's his answer.
That's very important.
And it's a very humble answer. But for me, somebody that needs answers, I'm like, that's not enough.
Well, that's what happens with the whole Christian faith. At a certain point, you want evidence and proof. That I'm the same way. Like I was like a new age atheist. I loved Sam Harris, Aldous Huxley. I read all those books in college. I was obsessed, and I think they're actually really good books. There's a lot of good things in them. But what ended up happening for me is it gets to a point where it's like, all right, I want to go through the archaeological evidence. I want to go historically. I want to look at the manuscripts, all these things. But it gets to this precipice where at a certain point, that's where faith takes over. Like science and everything is meeting you there. And it's like, well, at a certain point, I cannot prove that he walked on water. I cannot prove he became God. I cannot prove any of these things. And I know that. And that's the argument atheists can get on me and destroy me with. No question. But
they don't know either, though.
They don't know either, but it's like, it's that where it's like my faith then takes over where it's like, I wholeheartedly believe, with no doubt, that happened. And that's just that it is. And there's nothing I can argue against that. Everything up to that, we can have conversations, we can debate, talk about this. When did this happen? Is
What's
this
the
true?
point?
But for me, it's like, I actually think that is a very good point, because people should do that. And I think that's the biggest issue with a lot of Christians today, is that they stay in their echo chambers. And we're seeing it today with a lot of Christians with like these current events that are taking place.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
Israel, where a
So
lot of
speaking
them, where a lot of
Always.
them essentially stay in these chambers where they have their pastor, they listen to Fox or whoever it is, and they believe them and they fall in line.
Yep.
Where a lot of the time they get misguided, misled, and I believe they end up not doing Christian-like things and
Yes.
promoting Christian-like things.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like, you have to realize your job is to be an investigator of your faith. Like for me, that's how I see it. It's like, I try to do the best I can, where I'll look at like Muslim content because I'm so curious about the Quran. I'll also look at Hindu stuff. I went to a Hindu temple here because I was so fascinated by it.
Really?
Yeah, because that's your job. Like, you shouldn't just stay in your echo chamber. Like, I believe this entirely, but also when you cut yourself off from the rest of the world, you're missing out. You're not looking at what other people believe in the cultures. And like Indians and Hindus, like they come in one. They're culturally mixed together. But then also you have Christians out there where they think the Apostle Thomas went out, and they have Christian churches out there, which is fascinating. But it's like, all right, what is your belief? And then Buddhists, I've talked to so many Buddhists in California. Like, there's so many. Everyone's like a Buddhist, I feel like. And I want to know what they believe. So it's not just where it stops, where like, I believe the Bible, I'm not going to read anything else.
Mhm.
I feel like it's a Christian's job to continue to like look at stuff and push their faith and make them shake in their boots, because it's like, maybe this guy who's an Islamic scholar says something that really is profoundly important and impacts the Bible. Well, then now I need to do my job. You shouldn't rely on other people, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Like, as an atheist, I read Sam Harris and I was like, that is the truth. Jesus isn't real. None of it. And I got to a point where I'm like,
Then the vaccine happened.
You're like, you know what? Never mind.
Leslie's like, yo, fuck this guy.
No, 'cause then what
I'm going
happened
back over
is-
here.
Sorry, God.
But this what happened is I started regurgitating all these opinions, and I realized I never was doing my own due diligence. I was just taking these smart opinions.
Yeah.
I would push them in a conversation. I'd sound like a smart ass. People would be like, oh, damn, Alessi knows what he's talking about. And then one day I looked in the mirror and I was like, dude, I'm such a fraud. Like, because I had never read the Bible at that point. I had never investigated it. And then I was like, I'm listening to people, like, and that's good. You can listen to people that know what they're talking about and are professionals. That's awesome. But as an individual, it comes to a point where you have to do your own insight and look and make a decision. Because if you're just regurgitating other people's opinions, who are you? Like, what do you really believe? That
That's a
means
good point.
when something happens, like we're having now, geopolitics, these Christians, they're just going to listen to their pastor and they're like, yeah, pastor, whatever you believe, I'll go there.
Yeah.
I believe this. I believe that. And I'm always from the place where I'm like, wait, hold on. Let's see. What does it say in the Bible? You're wrong. That's not right.
Are you praising the Bible or you're praising the
Exactly.
pastor?
Exactly. Like our guest we had on now, why am I forgetting his name? The agnostic guy. Amazing. Cosmic skeptic.
Alex O'Connor.
Alex O'Connor. He's probably the most famous atheist,
Genius.
Very
agnostic
smart
guy
dude. Yeah.
on the
Genius.
internet.
Open-minded, too.
Yes, I wanted him on the podcast because I'm fascinated because he has a lot
British
of,
dude?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He was
He
awesome.
has a
Yeah.
lot of counterpoints to the Bible, and he actually debated the Knechtleys, Stuart and
Yeah, I
Cliff.
saw that. And that was a
And-
great debate.
It was a great debate, and I actually think he did a better job representing the side than Cliff did. I don't think Cliff did it was difficult. He's really well trained in debating, and
It's hard to debate a debater.
exactly. But
An
the point
Oxford
being,
debater.
Right, it really
Yeah,
is, though.
yeah,
Because
but
that's a skill in itself.
exactly. But the point is, it makes you question where you're like, I should probably do some research and figure out what he's trying to say here. Let me look at these Gnostic Bibles. Like, what's this all about?
Yeah.
You like, if you just ignore everything and you're like, I'm just gonna fall in line, then you're just a rat in the rat race.
And
There's real fast, Sean. I just because there's a lot of
I know, yeah,
important
yeah,
points that
yeah, I
Alessi's
agree.
making here. I want to make sure we get these in here because I'd actually love both of your guys' thoughts on this. But there's three things that come to mind with everything Alessi's saying about emphasizing the whole. And your job is to like investigate your faith, because I really like that. Number one, there are too many people who take every single word literally. Right.
Agreed.
There's a human element to this in what's written, even if you believe in divine intervention, whatever. There's a lot of fucking chapters in, say, the Bible, the Quran, you know, all these different religions and what they write down. Number two, when people in any religion, whether they're taking it completely literally or not, or even worse, like changing around what something really means to fit their own desires, then use that to try to lecture other people and tell them what their fate is in the afterlife or things like that. I hate that.
Yeah.
I don't fuck with that at all. But number 3, and this is at the core of everything. Like I think whenever we're having these conversations, Alessi, it's like, I think one of the worst things that ever happened to humanity is we convinced ourselves that science and religion are at war.
1000% agree.
They are seeking the same answer and should work together to bring, because they do it in different ways with different aspects, and they should seek to bring. Now, I'm not saying like, sit at the same desk and like do the same exact thing. I'm saying use those different understandings over time to try to get closer and closer to whatever we end up finding out in humanity, if we ever do. Truth is,
I couldn't agree more. And I think if you're on either side, right, if you're a whatever, even if you're not a Scientologist, right, let's just say you don't believe in Christianity and you always want to put the emphasis on science versus religion, or the opposite, like you always want to just put religion against science, it makes no sense, right? You said, I mean, if you're religious, you say science is just catching up to what religion already knows, right? Like they're finding whatever, like I think they found like Jesus is
The Shroud of Turin.
yeah, like stuff like that,
That's
like
cool.
and then people
Yeah.
that's awesome, and people are like in the comment section, we knew this, right, as believers in Christ, we knew this. You're just catching up now, like congratulations, way to go. But the other side is so ridiculous too, like no, the reason why this happened and we found cures to these diseases because of science and not God. Like, why are we not explaining the fact that they're both kind of going in tandem? And like you said, they're trying to answer the same questions, their perspectives maybe just a bit different.
It's just the whole meaning of life question. It really puts people in an uncomfortable place.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's getting towards. Like when you start asking someone what their meaning of life is, it can really make them question things. And that's where a lot of ego takes over and you become defensive.
Yeah.
Or you start slashing out at other people, or you try to bring down other people's like religions or things whatsoever. And that just, it's so sad, but maybe it's just a human response. But anytime that meaning of life question's asked, and it's like almost in a format of like, wait, do you believe this or you don't believe this? For whatever reasons, the reaction, if it's in a place where it's like this and it's fun and free flow, you can be very receptive. It's nice. But a lot of time it puts people like in their heels and they're like, it's this. And I know it's this. Don't tell me it's not this. And people have to be okay with, again, you're not going to have all the answers, and they can have a great point and you might not be able to rebuttal it. That shouldn't make you think I'm wrong completely. You know what I mean? Like that's what happens with people. They think they're completely wrong. If some scientific discovery is made, they think my faith is gone.
Right.
And I don't know why people think
I don't know
that.
why I think
It blows my mind where I'm like, okay, that's a cool scientific discovery. Investigate. What are they discovering? What's happening? Don't read the freaking Daily Mail headlines and then run
What
with
about
it.
the next thing they discover too that then changes the narrative again? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like people are always thinking, oh, this is it. We figured it out.
You'll never like,
Nothing to
and
say.
again, that's the beauty of being a human being, is like we'll never figure out
never
the
know.
answer to the age-old questions or question. And again, like that goes back to, there is this point of like, what is the point of constantly asking questions if it comes down to having a blind faith? But like you said, you're so confident in your religion and your belief that you're open to visiting a Buddhist temple and learning from these people, because maybe it changes your perspective. And now you have different questions that, okay, I can do research and have answers too. And I think what happens, it doesn't matter what you are becoming, right? If it's religious or you're starting a new diet, what tends to happen is people want to research just so they can debate really well. Like, I don't want to get stumped with this question, so let me research
true.
that.
So
and they don't
true.
even feel it, right? Like, oh, I'm going to read the Bible solely because somebody's going to ask me a question about it and I got to have the answer. No, read the Bible because you want to understand the Bible for yourself. Then it goes back to what you were saying, like the meaning of life. If there was an answer and it was in words and that answer was X, but you didn't believe and feel that answer, then it's meaningless to you. So if the answer in the Bible, I think I forget which, maybe in Matthew, and I just read it, so I'm not like well versed, but it says something about like, what is the biggest, like what should you be doing as a human being? And Jesus responds and says, love thy neighbor and love God. Like that's it. But truly like feel what that's supposed to feel like. Loving every individual that you interact with and loving Christ. If you had that in your life, you'd be pretty happy.
Oh my God.
That's pretty much all you would need.
Jordan Peterson said it best when he wasn't a Christian. He said, if you look at the history of if people who followed the Bible and people who didn't follow the Bible is the best manual to live a good life.
That's it.
It's like he said, it's proven that people have lived that life. It's if you want to take that perspective of like, I'm not going to believe in it, but I want to follow a good manual to life. It's proven time and time again. people that live those lives have the best life. Like they just are just so joyful, so much happiness and whatever. And that was a psychological study that he was claiming or whatever. So to your point, yeah.
That's it.
Also, by the way, we didn't say this earlier, but because Alessi like kind of downplayed it. But when we found each other, he, like he said, he had his podcast too. You can see why I saw the talent, obviously,
he's
as well.
talented, dude. This kid,
His
he's
podcast
got
was
it.
fucking. He was doing it on the side in college, like zooming in whoever he could. His podcast was
I was on it.
fucking phenomenal.
I was
remember
on
that.
it. So
Yeah.
listen, we went down a rabbit hole, which is a great rabbit hole.
That was a
I
great
love
rabbit
having these
hole.
conversations. I know you do. And I don't want to, the reason, again, I wanted to have you guys on today is not only to congratulate you, but I want to like share your journey for the people that are out there that, number one, think it just happens overnight and it's super easy. And I know that's like kind of played out, but I really want to get into the intrinsics behind building a podcast that seems like it's just one man band, where it's really not. It comes from a lot of support. It comes from actual people and roles. So a role like a producer, for example, you may think all he needs to know is technologically or being technical behind the camera. Whereas like how important is it to have a creative conversation and be like, hey, we're having this guest on, but like, what are we really going to fucking talk about? Or do you even want to have this guy on the podcast?
So that part we don't really ever have to do. Like Alessi with his podcast was pretty goddamn free flowing. I obviously was always free flowing on mine. And so we had that understanding. Like I know if I have Alex O'Connor coming in, we're probably going to talk about, you know, being an atheist or whatever. As it turned out, we talked for like 4 hours, and that was only a very small bit of it. It went down all these rabbit holes that I had no idea were coming, and that's why I like doing the content, because it's really just a pure conversation to me. So it's not so much that, but like stylistically of like, what's the vibe we're looking for? Who are the types of people we're looking to have in? What are we trying to do here long term? How are we building it in a space that's so saturated? What are the things we're doing off camera to do that? Which is just like, this is like a cascading effect of many multi-layered things. And like where Alessi began, you know, when you were doing the fan page back August 2022, he started, and my goal was just like, all right, because that was my bread and butter. I knew how to do that. I knew how to tell a story. I knew how to edit something great.
You got to tell him about the context. In December, he'd made a short that did like 46 million. And that was like the first, what was that? The first like bit inflection in the podcast.
Yeah. So, all right, maybe that's a good idea.
You know what I mean?
So
there's context to that.
2021, I realized, and you and I were talking through a lot of this. You helped me with this, obviously. But I realized that no podcasts were making shorts on TikTok. We weren't even at YouTube yet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, the ones that were taking 1080 by 1350 size videos from Instagram and just
So
putting it
trash.
on the
Isn't that
1080.
crazy? Like how it's crazy
it
that
was
was only
terrible.
a couple years ago.
Oh,
Yeah,
my,
I
God,
know.
it was
So
crazy. And I was seeing creators like you. I would see all these amazing creators in every other space doing unbelievable shit. And sometimes like you'd have a guy like Zach King who's doing like fucking virtual reality on there. It was incredible. And I'm like, these podcasts think they're competing against like just a few other podcasts. You're competing against everyone in the feed.
Yep.
You know, so I started to slowly morph the videos. I'm like, at the beginning, I'm a real audio visual guy. So I'm like, I'm going to work on making soundtracks for these things. Then I started to figure out storytelling was the way to go. So how do I tell the story the best? Then the TikTok algorithm, if you remember this, it always wanted me between 27 seconds and 29 seconds and 14 frames. It would not let me to 31 seconds and be like, fuck you, Julian, get that video out of here. So I had to learn how to tell succinct stories. And then once I got that down, then I'm like, ooh, let's make full-blown documentaries here. And I was doing a lot of views before that. And then end of July, beginning of August 2021, I started putting B-roll in there and learning how to edit that, eventually figuring out, you know, the human eye has like a 2 to 3 frame like lag time on seeing a video come up versus when they hear it auditorially. So I would make it like very satisfying for people. And this would take forever, but it was paying off. And so this whole time YouTube was trying to launch shorts. And I was posting content from TikTok. I would then make its own YouTube version, not just download it from TikTok, make its own YouTube version with different captions. Because I used to do the captions on TikTok because I thought that's what the algorithm wanted. I would sit there and like edit it with my finger like
You had a
this.
couple do $1 million though.
Yeah. But I'm saying like,
We're talking about big league numbers.
all
right? We're not talking
TikTok,
about millions.
on TikTok, it was doing millions.
Yeah.
But then on YouTube, where I'd make these other ones, they sent one in August 2021 after the Afghanistan pullout. I did a clip where I showed some of the footage and I was talking about it. I think that was from episode 62 with Terrence. But I was like, you see all these people falling out of these planes and shit. And it's like, this is what it was for. And that one slowly hit the algorithm and did, 2-3 million, something like that. But then I was posting everything else and they would have 120, 130% watch time and they'd do like 2,000 views. I'm like looking, and this was the first lull I ever hit in September 2021 where shit got bad. And and on TikTok, they weren't doing as many views and I was really trying to grow YouTube and I couldn't do it. And that's where what I'd like to say is like, for me personally, like the famous text came in where I was like, unloading all of my frustrations to you, like, John, this is over.
You know how he texts too, right?
I'm like, fuck. I used to text like this all the time, just like a download of information. And I'm like, and John's like, no, you're gonna be fine, bro. And I'm like, no, like, it's over. I'm fucked. This is laughable. I'm never gonna make it out of my parents' house. And he's like, dude, you're doing well. It's going to grow. You go through times like this. And I'm like, John, I'm 260 videos into YouTube, LOL. And he's like, well, maybe it'll take 261.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm so philosophical.
It wasn't 261, but it was like 264.
Which is so funny, dude.
Which also, one of the videos that took off first was one that this was like the only time I ever did this. You helped me score it. I don't know if I ever told you that.
No.
But it was one with Nick Castellucci from episode 272 where we were going through his story of like the FIFA underground thing getting busted by the FBI. And I couldn't figure out a good vibe for music on it, which was very unlike me. And I was like, what the fuck do I do? And you're like, yo, House of the Rising Sun. And I'm like, oh.
I do remember that.
Yeah. And then I made like 3 with that. And
Anger.
they all took off. I was like, fuck yeah.
Let's go, John.
Anyway, they started to go right after Thanksgiving 2021. The little dirt clip on YouTube started going like this.
Yeah, that was a big one.
And then it was the Castellucci ones right after that on like December 1st. And then when I would upload right away, it would do 30,000 views the first hour. And like I was like, holy shit, here it is. It's because no one was fucking doing it.
Right.
No one was doing it. So that month I just went nuts. And then everything I did moving forward went nuts. But I could only put out 1 or 2 a week because I was spending 25, 30 hours a clip. And if it was over 30 seconds, which YouTube let me do. TikTok didn't like that, but I saw YouTube liked me at like 35 to 45. Those would take 35 hours to do those ones because I'm OCD as fuck. And I would pull like 40 hours of video and go through it and change it, color correct it, make sure it was timed correctly, do all the captions down to like the shit that made it look great, but the little details probably didn't need to do that. But it was what it was. So they were ripping. And so then Alessi, I had told him.
Yeah.
Now, he had a little bit of a different memory on this, by the way. I never was, there was no point in 2021 where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to move this year. I never said that, but I probably did say to him. In fact, I think I do remember saying this. Maybe like March 2022. I had told you in 2021, hey, whenever this happens, like if you want to be the guy, you be the guy. You're like, great. Yeah. So he's still fucking hanging in there like an idiot. But, I was grateful for it. Right.
Stubborn.
So, I'm like, wow, this kid won't go away. We love that. So maybe it was like March, April 2022. I could see that we were going to get there at some point because obviously things were ripping, at least on the shorts, and we were starting to build the show from that. So at that point, I think I did say to you, I'd love to be out of here November, December, which didn't end up happening. That would have been November, December 2022. But Alessi and I started really talking about what this could look like. So he flew up August 2022. And my goal, like, he didn't really know how to edit. He had done the podcast. He knew how to put together a podcast and edit that. But like, as far as like shorts, like he had never done that. So I was like, I'm like, all right, let's just start from scratch. Let's see if he can learn how to find a story, find the hook, edit that down pretty succinctly, make it look clean. Right. And then maybe put music behind it and get used to that. So he did that and like in hindsight, compared to the editing he does now, it's terrible. Just like the editing I did in 2021 compared to what I can do now is terrible. But like at the time, like it was really good. So he built that fan page from like August to February. Like in there where he would just post content all the time. Some of them did, some Paul Rosalie clips did 10 million, 9 million. He had a Bustamante one do 7 million. David Satter was doing 5-6 million.
Right. Yeah.
Like he was ripping and also ripping on TikTok too. He built his second page there.
Yeah.
So then he moved up. He came up and did the James Fox podcast with me. That was like, what, January 3rd or 4th, 2022 or 2023. And then 3 weeks later, he's like, surprise, I just got a place. I'm moving up here with my girl. I was like, oh my God. And so then in the winter and spring, we were talking about what this looks like. So he starts off end of April 2023, started with me officially. At the very beginning, it was technically for $0 a month, but 21 days in, we moved it up to $500 a month.
Nice. All right, you can buy some snacks.
Yeah,
Exactly.
listen, I've always said this to Alessi, and I hope, you be honest. You don't have to just say what I want to hear.
He's
But
not sitting right there.
I've always said, like, as things go up, you're going up.
Right.
And
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I'm looking at him like, I'm going to throw you out
You're
that
like,
front
right?
No, yeah.
Do you agree or no?
Yeah. I was sold from the very beginning. I was like, bro, whatever it takes. And, there were some rough months, but to where we are now, you've kept your word. And it's just been, it's been cool. It's been really cool where it's like, dude, I don't know if this is going to work out. I believe. And then it turned out. Yeah.
So,
That's cool.
I think the trickiest part about like belief is like you can say it, but truly feeling it sometimes there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
Do you guys remember a point where you're both like in sync and you're both like, yeah, there's no point. There's a point of no return. Like we are going to scale this thing until it becomes the biggest podcast in
As
the
soon
world.
as I moved up,
Yeah.
dude, it was
You were locked in.
Oh, it was like,
Even during the lull time of like the 23 when you guys were like,
He was the one keeping me, like I said, when I called him July 2023, I could feel my body was just on the last limbs, and I knew I couldn't start that treatment till like the end of November based on what the doctor said the timeline was.
Yeah, okay.
And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know shit was going to go bad as well at that time. But I
Right.
said to him, I'm like, I'm a miserable person right now. It's not like me. I'm trying not to be that way, but just fucking bear with me until, I think I said like February, March next year, which turned out to be like Nostradamus. But, there really were, when I first got up to Hoboken, there were so many just low points where I never lost belief that like I was going to make it, and I still haven't made it, but I'm looking at things like I know we're on the pathway today, to be there. And I was still, back then I was on that trajectory, and I'm like, we're going to be fine. But those little intermittent moments where you're getting knocked around, and then I won't get into it, but also we dealt with some bullshit in the middle of that too. I'll just leave that there. And that was the one time I ever had to litigate some things publicly off the podcast. And I don't like that world. I don't do the controversy world. I don't do the bullshit. I never want to do that again. That just happened at the worst possible moment too. Cause I'm just feeling like shit all the time. But, Alessi was he's such a positive person and was so upbeat and patient with me.
He's a Christian.
And then I remember, that's
baby.
that's probably a big part of it. But like he was so patient with me.
Yeah.
Dealt with, sometimes I was just like a nasty person. If I'm being honest, I regret it completely. It's what it was at the time. And I remember him saying, I remember you went to come over to do some work one day, and this was another place where like the universe lined up. And I had decided, it was like a Monday or Tuesday or something like that. I had decided the weekend before, I'm like, you know what? I'm in a really bad place. I had just started the treatment at the time. I'm like, this will get better in a few months. We're going to be fine. The views will come back. I know it doesn't look like that, but they're going to come back. And I'm like, I need to, as much as I don't want to do it, I need to offload stuff. I need to give Alessi some of the stuff he's been asking for, because I can't be doing this. And literally he walked in the door. We didn't even go into the studio. Like before we went into the studio, he's like, look, dude, you need to, and he lists out like 3-4 things that were among the things I was going to be
Isn't
like,
that crazy?
He's
when
like,
that
you need to
happens?
offload this shit because we can all see it. I don't know who we all was, but that's what he said. I remember thinking, like, who's we? Like, it's just you. He's like,
Jesus and I are just-
I'm like,
Yeah,
are
me
you
and JC
talking
were
to
talking
people?
and,
Are you talking to my people or something? Who are seeing me? But
were
he's
all
like, we
talking.
can all see it. You are going to crash.
Yeah.
Like this is not sustainable. Like you as a person right now, and like how you are, this is not sustainable. And I was going to be doing that, but sometimes I wonder if like we had gone in the studio that day and he hadn't said that, in my head, I would have just rectified
you
myself
just
like,
wouldn't have
nah, fuck, we'll do this later.
Right,
And
right.
thank God we did, because, and one of them was like the merch too, which I felt so bad for. He killed it on, but like merch is the worst business. So he even wasted his time on that, and still it all worked out. But like there were a few things far more important than merch that involved like content and editing and channel managing that like he took over and never looked back. And like the other thing is, Alessi's good for my OCD, because he knows that there's certain things like, yes, details matter. I don't want to act like they don't, but there's certain things that like there's only shit he and I are going to see.
Yeah,
Other
of
people
course.
aren't going to see that. So if it goes out faster and X, Y, and Z doesn't quite happen, we want that because we'll get 5 where we used to get 1 out.
Whereas
what I
like
mean?
you maybe were hard pressed, like, no, this has to be perfect.
Yes,
he's
and I'd
like,
sit
dude, we
there
have
and
to just get
fucking,
it.
and like,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
took a while to wean me off that. I think he, I mean,
Yeah, no, because you're such a perfectionist. You want things done, and I'm like, dude, this is taking away from the impact it has. It satisfies you, but people aren't seeing it, so it's taken away from where we could be sooner.
right.
And because of that, it was just as soon as we started offloading that and we got it done, I'm like, dude, I'm gonna streamline these things because I'm all about like making it as efficient and as fast as possible with a quality product.
Yep.
Sure.
So it's like I know where his bar is here. I just need him to get it down here, and I'll meet that bar every single time.
Was it hard for you to like? It's sometimes. Listen, you're younger and technically you're employed by him, right?
Mhm.
So I'm assuming sometimes it's hard for you to like
hate
tell
that
him how it is. I know, but it's reality, right? Like, so for you to be like, hey, listen, man, I know you don't want to hear this, but here it is.
Yeah.
Was that hard for you in the beginning, or are you always very upfront about it?
We have a very good relationship in that regard. Like a lot of the conversations that are off air, like we have some, I would say, back and forths a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But I've never felt because he's always been, if you know Julian, he's just very honest and upfront with you about things. Just like this is how I am. So that gives me permission to be like, all right, I can do that to you too.
Yeah.
And
it
because
does.
of that,
It opens
we
it
have
up.
a very much dynamic where, after a guest, we'll be like, yeah, that guy was horrible. We didn't like that guy, or like this edit doesn't look good. And we can be honest, but like with sincerity. You know what I mean?
You know what I also do? I don't, you know this though. Yeah, I'll say this and I feel like you'll know this, but I work out material on Alessi. Him
Really?
and he and Danny Jones, and actually sometimes on you too, and now Deef obviously. But like they don't know I'm doing that. But when I have,
I know
when I'll
exactly what
see,
you mean.
I'm a very emotional guy first,
yeah.
right? I have to train that pragmatism side, right? It starts with my emotional reaction side, which means when I first hear news on something, I'm like, fuck, or like, yeah, right?
Correct.
And then I got it. So when that's happening, remember, we're going to be going on camera soon. And I don't want to be that guy where I'm like here all the time and then having to be like, oh, sorry, I fucked up. So I will work out intense arguments on like Alessi and Danny Jones. And I know when they're sitting there like, yeah, oh, you're cooking. I know like, oh, all right, I got good evidence for
got
this. And other
something.
times they're like, what the fuck? No, that's not right. And then I'll be like, oh, I got to peel back on this and look at the facts.
Huh.
So that's huge. That's actually something like, that's just, it's not like planned topics or anything. It's just like when I start to, it's like when an idea comes in and I start to get an idea about something. I don't say to Alessi, hey, what do you think about this? I'm like, yo, fuck this. Or like, yeah. And then I start working with it. And then I know based on whether he's coming back at me or like snapping, like, let's go. That's it. Whether or
That's
not
so
I'm on the
interesting.
right track.
And it helps because I have my own opinions and I stand by a lot of my opinions. So I don't necessarily always agree with him. And then we go back and forth and we'll have these conversations that are just like, we're trying to get to a better truth or better understanding of what it is. And we're going back and forth. It's not always like, damn, that's smart. Cool.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Use that.
yeah, that was awesome. I think that's so.
Yeah.
That's such a good point, and you don't even have to be a podcaster to appreciate that point. Like I have thoughts sometimes that I'm like, in my mind they sound great, on paper they sound great, and then I try to vocalize it. And I'm like, what the fuck did I just say? So like I just had the conversation with somebody before the podcast, because again, think about it. Like you're in a room, it could be a stranger, you got cameras on you. I know you don't let these things get to you, but like you are under a bit of pressure. And so if that's the first time you're saying something, you're like, all right, let me let it out now. And you got one shot at it. And you're like, motherfucker, if I just let out the first one on Alessi prior to this,
On a controversial
even
thing.
like little
Yeah.
words that you said, you're like, oh, maybe that didn't make sense. Let me say it. I'm sorry to say, I don't have to send this to him. So my buddy Nico's in real estate. You're going to fucking love this.
Nico.
So I love Nico.
Shout out the dog.
He's been one of my best friends for a very long time.
He got
And-
us our office, by the way. You know that, right?
yeah, he's
Yeah.
fucking great.
Killer.
And he and a lot of my friends, again, like if you're in a new profession, kind of like what you were just saying, if you call me and maybe I don't need to hear this information, but you're fleshing out your pitch or whatever, I'm listening and I'm locked and I want to hear how you say it. And if you're using me as a soundboard, that's great. And he kept using the word output as in like his effort he's putting in. He's like, yeah, the output that I have. And I was like, I heard it 3 times. I was like, I'm gonna stop you right there. Just so you know, just so you know, like that's not really what output means. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, yeah, no. The output is like almost like the result. Like that's what comes from whatever you're doing. And he's like, do you know how many people I've said that to? He's like, then now I have to rehear these conversations of me saying the word output improperly. And I'm like, well, maybe you just fleshed this out with me prior. You would have known this. So now, again, the honesty that I had with him, he probably won't make that same mistake again. I have done that to my buddies too. Like, where I'll say a word, maybe like Joe, and he's like, that's not what that means. I'm like, well, I'm not no fucking dictionary, man. Like, tell me what it means then.
John just goes full Kanye on Taylor Swift on Nico. Like, I'm gonna stop you right
I
there.
literally, I said, this is the 3rd time you said it,
Beyonce
Nico.
had the best video of all time.
That's what I said. I said, Nico, the word you're looking for is input, and I know that, and I'm gonna stop you right now. I'm gonna stop you now. So then when you say it again, you say. So now we have this running joke about output. Anyway, I think it is super important to have sounding boards in whatever you do in life, and having somebody that you know is on your side. And I think there is, listen, I don't want to talk to somebody that's always going to go against. If I say red, you say it's blue, listen, that's going to create an argument. And maybe I don't need that, right? Whereas you could see the good points of what Julian is saying, but then also maybe even like, hey, flesh it out and say it like this, because that sounds a lot smoother and better on the podcast. And I think now, especially again, because you have that pressure of like every one of these episodes has to be bangers, that's a lot on one person to handle alone.
Yeah, I listen, you're never going to be able to flesh out even close to everything. If you're lucky, you get to flesh out 5% of the things that are actually going to come up.
Right.
But when it's things that are really happening in the world, like big things that are highly complex and highly nuanced, and no one who's talking about them is those things, like nuanced or, whatever. That's where it helps. And, you also, you get to work out communication. I've given people the advice in the past. I still do this sometimes where, you also listen to yourself.
Yes.
Meaning I will walk in a circle for an hour and flesh out an argument into a voice note.
Oh, well.
And then, you can hear yourself talk and be like, do I sound fucking stupid right now?
Wait, hold on. You'll have an opinion on something. You'll vocalize this opinion into your voice notes and then listen to it back.
No, I don't always. Actually, most of the time I don't have to listen to it back, because when you're talking to yourself like that into the voice note, you're actually listening to yourself talk, which you don't do when you're in a conversation with someone else. So even like things like that, but you can't simulate anything better than having another person be that wall to mount stuff off of. So the vibes like that, to go back to your like original questions here, behind the scenes are really important. And then you also, like Alessi he's been the only guy.
Yeah.
Right? Like we got the Venezuelan, he's killing it. He's new, contract editor, doing a great job. But like as far as like actual shit with the product, he's been the only guy doing this. And so he has to wear a lot of hats, and I got to wear a lot of hats, because as things go on, this is the shit that sucks about the offloading process. I'll offload things, which adds to his load. Pause. Yep. But
thank you.
But then like new things will come up that I got to bring on. So it's almost like I'm constantly treading water at the same level. Yeah. And he had to eventually tread water at like the same level as well. And so like where Alessi's really, really done an unbelievable job over the past year, and particularly is with the secondary content. So we have 4 channels, right? The first, and I wish we didn't have to do this. You brought this up earlier, so I should explain this. I wish YouTube wasn't like this. I wish I could do everything on one channel. YouTube's algorithm is so bizarre. They want specific content on specific pages. So we have 5 pages technically, but 4 pages, right? The first page is all the main episodes, right? Full 3-hour episodes. The second page is clips. So think 8 to 20 minute clips. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's all him at this point. The third page is 1-hour episodes. It's the 1-hour Julian Dorey show. So people that don't have 3 hours, congratulations. Every time I do a podcast, there's 3 podcasts in there. So we just repost content in an hour form.
Wait, hold on. So the Bustamante podcast, you have that on the main page. Mm-hmm. You'll then take that and let's say that's 3 separate podcasts on the other page.
Sure, but he's not going to put them all out that week. He'll put one out a week later, another one out 3 months later, another one out 3 months. You know what I mean?
It's a different audience.
He's still going back to episode 100 for some of them to like grab a podcast on that page.
So let me ask you, like, let's take a super viral episode that did really well on the main page. Mm-hmm. What are the odds of it when you segment it out doing really well on these other pages? Is it
Very
almost
well.
like, yeah, it is. Okay.
Better odds.
So I think the point to be made is you're not taking one piece of content and leaving it as one piece of content. You're stretching this out and squeezing the juice out of this thing, even from like a purely monetization
for
standpoint.
different people. So that's the third channel with the 1 hour, the 4 channel shorts. So these are 4 different types of people.
You don't put your shorts on your main page?
No, we did. We
Wow.
went back to it even, and the algorithm doesn't want that. That's why a lot of big shows don't do it. I've gone back and forth with. I've gone back and forth.
Write that down.
With Sean's guy Kemble on this. He and I talk about this a lot and what we're seeing in the algo because they post on everything. He's still doing that, but like, you know, at Sean's size, Sean Ryan, you can get away with that, but they don't get the results they should get on that main page with their shorts.
Well, let me ask you now. So again, you take a newer page like mine. We have almost 20,000 subs.
It's
So if you guys are
different.
not subscribed, please subscribe.
It's different.
So you think we should keep everything on?
I think so at this point.
Yeah.
I probably waited too long. I did not open up a second channel. Like day one when I launched the podcast, I had 2. I immediately closed the first channel. I was like, oh no, you got to do this on one channel.
Right.
I did not launch the second channel until January 2023 when I had approximately, I would have had around 300,000 subs at that time.
That's the one thing I wish we started sooner.
Yes, I should have started that in
second
January
page.
2022.
A clips page or
A
something?
clips page. That
Yes.
should have been from the beginning.
Yes. No, I wouldn't see. That's where I disagree. I wouldn't have done it from the very beginning, but I would have done it at like when we crossed 100,000 subs. That's when I would have done it, and that would have been a year before. So
Okay. I mean, because I was going to ask you the question, like, if you were to start this, you're at 1 million subs now, right? Thank God. If you were to start this over again, what are certain things you would do, and what of those things would be separating the pages out earlier?
So there's really 2 answers here. The first thing is, you know, luck happens where, what's the quote? Luck happens where preparation meets opportunity,
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
There are so many things that, like, sometimes at night I will randomly have pop in my head about a moment that happened where I decided to do this instead of that, whatever that little thing is, and I'm like, if I didn't do that, I'd be dead right now, because I might have offed myself, you know. And it's like, but here we are, not really.
Thank God.
You know what I mean? Yeah. And so, you know, maybe if I didn't text John Rondi that day and he didn't tell me to do 261, I would have fucking, you know, not done it. Yeah. So, it could be the littlest things, down to an edit, down to a content decision, down to a type of content I did, down to when I decided to do something versus not. And it's like all these things had to go right to get here. By the same token, there's also a lot of things where I'm like, fuck, if I had done that, Jesus Christ, you know, we'd be at 6 million right now.
Yeah.
You can't beat yourself up on that too much, though, because the amount that the 2 of us have learned experientially and then built upon based on quickly learning something and pivoting based on that is critical, and it's helped us grow the page. So like, we've done that, and you have to be moving fast and breaking shit sometimes to fail. And then instead of just being like, wow, yay, I failed, that's what you're supposed to do. Be like, okay, I failed. What can we learn from this? Exactly. And how can we not fail again at that? And so it's hard to say what things are. The only thing that, like, I'm proud of that we could be way bigger on that we're not, because I didn't do it, is like trying to do controversial content. What I mean by that is I knew the formula, I would say 3 years ago. I knew the formula in 2022 because I had been doing this long enough. I had studied on the internet long enough. I'm like, all you got to do is if your talent is in communication, which my talent is, all you got to do is start fucking taking a stance on everything one way or the other.
You are good at that.
And putting it out there in the strongest form opinions. But that's not me. First of all, I'm not a guy that likes to just talk to the camera myself. I'm good at it.
You're great at it. You're not good. You're a I don't know how you do it. It's like when he did his live or whatever, I think it was like a live reaction or something. It was like 30 minutes of him ripping to the camera. I was like, who are you talking to? How are you doing this? This is unbelievable.
He said, like, the phone's ringing.
I was like, how are you doing this? I was like, this is so good. And then he got mad. He threw a pencil. I was fucking dying. I forgot why he threw a pencil.
Yeah,
but
he threw a pen when I threw a pen when you called me in the middle of that one recording. I was like, fuck.
Yeah, why? Yeah, why? What was happening?
Because it's actually good you called me. The audio was cutting out on the computer.
Yeah.
And I was so pissed off because I tried to have it perfect. And
hilarious.
But anyway, what I'm saying is
hilarious for me, not for
like,
him.
even with those lives when I was doing those, like, I have very moderate opinions on things. I see things from a journalistic standpoint. I really do see things both ways, and I think the answer is at equilibrium. That does not get clicks. Does not get clicks. Now, if I come out and say, let's look at Donald Trump. Trump is God or Trump is Hitler. Oh, now we're going down the pathways where I can start.
How do you
getting
feel about
clicks.
Trump, by the way?
Like my opinion on him as a president, as
Yeah.
a person.
President.
I'm agnostic. I understand.
He just said he doesn't take a modest approach.
That is a moderate approach.
I know. I wanna hear your extreme
I
opinion.
understand exactly why he won. It didn't surprise me at all. What you have to say objectively is that the Biden administration was atrocious on every level. You know, I remember thinking at the beginning, because he was always like dead, like that much was clear. It was clear he wasn't in charge.
Yep.
But I remember the first like 7 months, I was like, you know, it's not the worst thing I've ever seen.
So how do you feel about Trump, by the way?
I'm agnostic on
Explain,
him.
please.
So, first of all, a part of my job, at least the way I look at it, so it's just from my seat, the way it is whether I like it or not, I have a journalistic endeavor in what I do. Right? I never think of myself as a journalist in a way, but when it comes to politics and the way things are, my job is to try to understand all sides and represent that and, you know, let the public decide for themselves. I think that's something we've really lost in the journalism class. And so if people like me, and hopefully there's a lot of other ones out there, and I think there are, can kind of bring that back, that would be great. But, you know, I truly do believe in the middle ground with things. I've seen this again and again and again and again and again on my stances. I'm sure Alessi can speak to this as well. It's like, at least from on how he sees my stances. But like, you know, I always talk about the universal law of physics. For every action, there's an equal but opposite reaction, which lands at equilibrium. Society's way better when the actions are here rather than here. And we keep going like this. And that's not good for anyone. But you also have to speak objectively about stuff. So when it comes to why Trump won, it didn't surprise me one bit.
Right.
I fully saw it coming. And frankly, he deserved to win. And the reason he deserved to win is because, objectively speaking, the Biden administration was a disaster. And it's kind of crazy to look at it because he was always dead. Don't get me wrong. Like, he was never in charge. I was under no illusions that he was okay at any point. But the first like 7 months, whoever was doing anything like in his administration, it's not even that it was good. It wasn't. But like, shit was kind of quiet.
Yeah.
It was like a nice little like, and I remember thinking like, all right, well, I don't like this. We don't know who's running the government, but maybe if this is just like a step over period for 4 years and then we can get to something like a little better. All right. And then Afghanistan happened in August 2001. And it was just like, and everything after that was terrible. Obviously, he had done some executive orders from the beginning that were overstepping. That was one thing that wasn't great. Those continued. Who even knows if he was actually signing them as well? And you just saw, like, for me, the Democrats quadrupled down on like 5 or 6 things that it's just like, well, just don't do this and you'd be normal. They quadrupled down on the woke shit. They quadrupled down on the trans shit. They quadrupled down on the open border shit. They quadrupled down on the fucking vaccine, which was controversial to a lot of people. And they quadrupled down on endless wars. Just those 5 things right there. Oh, and number 6 was some of the censorship. Like emailing Twitter, like, this guy's problematic, get him off. Like, if you just didn't do those 6 things, didn't even have like the total opposite stance on some of them, you need to, but just had a normal stance and could talk like a normal person, people would have been like, oh, all right, this is great. Maybe not even great, but, you know, there's always going to be haters. There's going to be people who are like, fuck this, I'm a Republican, and that's fine. But I'm saying, like, there would have been more people like, all right, this isn't the worst thing I've ever seen. But it's almost like those 4 years also like tripled down my belief in the uniparty system, because I'm like, they know this doesn't poll well. Yeah. They know these things don't poll well, and they're still doing it. So either something's infected in their head to do this, which could be, or it's like on purpose. Well, you know? And so with Trump, to answer your question, like, I got a lot of issues with Trump as a politician. He's a very entertaining guy. He's funny as fuck. I would watch him read the phone book. And I will say, you know, what they did to him in those 4 years, summarily, like slowly turning up the, not even slowly, like turning up the heat to basically like get him out of there, was fucked up on every level. It gave him what he wanted. It made him an underdog, We know those charges were bullshit. It was all bullshit. They just fucking hated the guy. They raided his wife's panties drawer.
Yeah.
You know, like, why are you doing that? There's nothing good that can come of that. In fact, it's only going to be bad for you because it's going to make people sympathize with him, and that's what it did. And what I will never take from him, ever, ever. And I remember reacting to it at the time, and I still agree with every single thing I felt at that time. When he took that bullet to the ear and got up and did like the fight thing, you can't fake that, bro.
No, you
that
can't.
was the most American moment in modern history. It was and like every fucking pipe hitter I talked to, I know Alessi talked with them as well. Every single one, all the tier 1 guys were like, you learn who someone is when the bullets start flying, and that motherfucker's about it.
And how about the fact that like this is an ex-military guy? Like he's never seen somebody trying to shoot at him before. That's the first time you've been shot at, and you stand back up and say, "Fight for your nation."
It was amazing. Yeah. It was amazing. So whether you agree with him politically or not, in one moment, it's hard for people to put that aside. I understand that he's controversial, but like, you gotta tip your hat to that for sure. So I totally get why he won. I got, political differences with things that the Democrats and Republicans do. I'm always gonna have that. And, there's things like, things got so fucked up that legitimately 2 hours into his presidency on January 20th, he got to tweet out a victory. And the victory was, I just signed a bill. There's 2 genders.
Right.
And it's like, that's how fucked up we got. The bar was like, there was no bar. The bar wasn't low. There was no bar.
Exactly.
It's just like victory. And people are like, yep.
Well, it's the whole thing of like you said, action and reaction resulting. Like if you're gonna go so far left, like you have to result in going almost a little bit too far right to have this equilibrium,
which I hate.
Which you hate, but like it's kind of reality. Yes. And the other thing about him too is he is a bit of an egomaniac. So like he'll
totally
like
he's like a bit.
Yeah, he what did he just do? Like he literally just signed maybe the other day something about prescription pills and reducing the price. Didn't he like
because China and them had a deal with the tariffs?
Yeah, but didn't he like reverted something that just like put it back to where it was just to say that he did it type of thing? I forget
Sounds
what
like a politician.
Yeah. And everyone's like, well, that was already like, that's just kind of the thing that we have to now get used to as like a politician. And people are hyper focusing on it because it's him, whereas like all politicians do this shit.
I've always given this speech to people because it's just human nature. We prove it again and again. One thing we do not fail at as a human race is physics. It proves itself again and again. And I think ideas are actually I don't mean this literally, I mean this figuratively, are physics. And so just look since World War II. Let's start there, okay? Truman, left. Eisenhower, right. Kennedy, they whacked him, kept Johnson in there, left. Nixon, right. They got rid of Nixon, left Ford in there. Left back to Carter. Right back to Reagan. Reagan bought 4 extra years of his intel buddy, H.W. Clinton left. Bush right. Obama left. Trump right. Biden left. Trump right. It's not new. This is what we do. People run from, people are always going to look at what's wrong because what are they trying to do? They're trying to protect their wallet, their family, and their ideas. And so when things run into any of those 3 things, when things aren't going perfectly in those 3 things, they're going to look at someone to blame, and whoever's in power, they're going to blame. And I don't mean that cynically. It's not to say like those people are wrong to blame, but like politicians constantly will make promises and do 25% of them, if that. Mm-hmm. So then people hit them on that, and goes back to the other one, and the other side's the same.
Do you think, because your knowledge of everything is just fucking incredible. So the fact that you knew the presidents in order was fucking nuts. Do you think that if it does sway back to Democratic Party in the next 4 years, it'll have to be somebody a little more in the middle? Because I feel like there's no way we go back to where we once were with, like you said, the 6 points that are like so ridiculous to even comprehend.
The Democrats might have ideologically been in a worse place than the Republicans were in 2008, which is hard to do because the Bush-Cheney White House was the most damaging White House in American history. As for all the controversy and bluster we've had over the past 10 years with people arguing about which of these White House was more damaging, think about economically, geopolitically, war-wise, fucking housing-wise, everything. everything that could go wrong by the end of the Dick Cheney White House, because that's whose White House it really was, went wrong. And the Republicans were at the lowest point ever. Jesus Christ could not have beaten Barack Obama in 2008 in that election. All right, like he would have lost. I'm sorry,
Well,
but you know, I'm
you're probably
telling you,
right.
I probably would have lost. So you know, I think the Democrats might even be in a lower place, not because of the damage, and there was damage as we just laid out. To be clear, like they didn't quite have the chance to do the damage that Bush did in 8 years. Bush Cheney did in 8 years. That said, the ideology of like religious ideology towards very odd shit got so rampant that when you take away people's right to speech and their comfortability in being able to express ideas, which is what they did, that is the ultimate, like, once you come into that and then try to legislate into people's lives and home life, people don't fuck with that. So, you know, they're going to have to change. There have been voices in the Democratic Party that have been shut down over the past years who have tried to rise up and say, what the fuck are we doing? We're supposed to be the party of, blue collar America. We've lost that. And so we will see what they do. So far, I haven't really seen anything to say that's going to change, but they'll have to learn at the ballot box. The Republicans learned in 2012. At the ballot, well, I would argue they didn't learn. Trump saved them from themselves 4 years later. But in 2012, Mitt Romney got his ass kicked. And they were like, fuck, we thought we were going to beat the cool black guy. But it turns out, Mitt Romney wasn't going to do that. And so they had to go home and try to figure shit out, which I don't think they did. But like, it may take that in the next election. That's a lot can happen before 2028.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Yes, to answer your question, there has to be some motion there. And the biggest thing is, like, you got to be willing to express ideas. And I can't believe I'm going to do this right now. But I will give a little credit to one of the ultimate sleazeballs of politics, Gavin Newsom, who he's my favorite guy. He's like he's the most shameless guy ever. I love watching him. I think he's William Jefferson Clinton, not as talented, but like he really believes what he says. I did not have sex with that woman. In Clinton's head, he was like, no, I didn't. And she literally like gave him road dome right underneath that desk right there. But anyway, Newsom is at least making an effort. He starts a podcast. His first guests are like fucking Charlie Kirk, Steve Bannon, and he's talking. And expressing ideas and saying things that are totally flip-flop flooper, but like, I'll give credit where it's due, where he's like, oh yeah, maybe we shouldn't have, men and women's sports, right? Like, you got to start somewhere.
Right.
And people don't want to hear that, but like, even if it's him or someone like that who's sleazy as fuck and has been a terrible governor, like, if they're moving the conversation a little bit, I don't give a shit about them as an individual, but that is helpful to America because you have to bring people more moderate. Because, by the way, the more that goes on, the more extreme opinions form on the other side, on the right side. I'm not going to get into all that right now, but I have seen that happen. I know you've seen it happen too. We talk about it. And that worries me a lot. I don't make a distinction between extreme opinions. If an extreme opinion is on the left or the right, it's a problem. Yep. And they manifest in different ways, but they're based on the same psychology and a lot of the same established beliefs about what the state of affairs is. They just have different solutions. That's why, for example, the two guys who should have been running against each other in 2016, if the DNC didn't push Hillary Clinton through, were Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump. Now, outside of the fucking New York accents, these guys have nothing in common when it comes to solutions. They have totally different ideas with a small overlap on some of the bringing jobs back to America. There's a little bit there. But other than that, they got nothing in common. But what they did have in common is they took their finger and they put it smack dab on the problem. And they spoke to those people and they knew exactly what the biggest issues in the underbelly of society were. And that's why people gravitated towards them. And to me, that's one of the ultimate, like, in the context of modern history, that's one of the fact that it was on both sides. People talk about Trump a lot in that election because he ended up winning. He was the candidate for Republicans. But the fact that both sides actually had that grassroots where they both had populists who were like, holy shit, we're 8 years after the financial crisis. We're fucking 13 years after the Iraq war breaking out and civilization is fucking crumbling. Yeah. Here's why. We got to fix it. Like, that could have been a moment to bring people together. And to be fair, like, yeah, I mean, Trump deserves some blame for the fact that didn't happen because he was so incendiary. I know he likes to be a New York businessman. Trust me, that's the people I fuck with. Like, we've grown up here. Like, we like that. I do understand, like, even someone like me, if I ever ran for that office, which I never would, to be clear, but like, I'd have to change a little bit of my style. I can't just be New Jersey Jules the whole fucking time. You know what I mean? Like, it's funny, and sometimes there's places where it's useful. I, for one, think it's useful when you're talking to the head of the Taliban and you hand him a fucking picture and say, I'm going to blow up you and your whole family if you fuck something up. I think that's pretty awesome.
I think so too.
But like, you know, it's a 1 out of 10 thing. And Trump's like, I'm going to do it 10 out of 10 times.
Correct.
And that gets him in trouble. And it got him in trouble back then, obviously. But, you know, the final point here is that the biggest thing about Trump is that even though he's like a billionaire who was also came from a pretty good family, he did, to be fair to him, like, he built a lot and he did work a lot. And people take that from him, and that's not correct. But like, you would think like that's not relatable, right? But that motherfucker was so relatable. Even if some of it was faking it, and I don't know, only he knows that, like, man, did he make it look real? He put the hard hat on with people, and you believe that he really was like among them, even if he was still wearing a suit. He's like, no one in the Republican or Democratic Party would go to the fucking coal mines and talk with people. They both had lost their way. And he went to the mines and he said, I'm talking with you. I see you. Yeah. And like, you cannot take that from him.
No, you can't. What about the one time where he went to like McDonald's and it was like closed down? And,
that was incredible.
He like pretended to work. I mean, that's
hello.
Yeah, he's like he had like somebody fake like drive to the drive-through.
Yeah, I remember. I think it was Cenk Unger from the Young Turks. I want to say it was him. I hope I'm citing the right person. Even he was like, after that, he was like, you know, he's on the left side. And it was leading up to the election. He's like, it does not matter what you think of Trump. If you don't think that that was a fucking incredible political photo op, you're an idiot. That was amazing. An amazing idea. Yeah. It just it showed people, like, even if he's faking it, like, if you don't like him, you don't even have to give him credit for it being real. The fact that he made the effort and went and did it and did fake it. Like,
right.
Like, it's a low bar, but like, Jesus Christ, like, that's something. It
was the principle behind what he was doing.
Yes, there was a principle behind it.
It's just crazy how like caught up we all get with like whatever is going on in the moment, right? Like the wokeness culture that we all were involved in, that obviously now looking back, we're like, that is ridiculous. But like in it, we were very afraid to say certain things and do certain things. And now we had this opposite slingshot effect where like everybody's trying to say the dumbest things ever and be super outlandish because like we can, it's America, it's 2025. We can be racist and we can be sexist and like, what? No, you can't and you shouldn't be. And that's not what the intention was behind that. But like you said, you can't just now go from crazy action to like an equilibrium without going crazy right side. And I'm sure that'll kind of revert back to being normal again.
But I don't like that.
No, of course not.
But you're exactly right how you're saying it. It's like a course correction.
People are like saying the retard word now, and it's like that's cool
I know,
to say
dude,
now.
People are saying it. I mean, to be fair, I never stopped. I just knew not to say it on camera because no one ever meant it that way. Like exactly. If you look at like racial epithets and stuff, I don't say those words because there's history there, and people meant it that way when they said that. If you ever walked up to someone who was mentally challenged and said that word to them, I don't care. I mean, maybe you're the fucking God guy. You can judge here, but like you're going to hell. Like no one ever did that. You know what I mean? So
I hear you saying.
The intention was never there, and that's why like I knew not to, I still sometimes would say it though, and I'd have to bleep it. And we still have to bleep it because it'll get demonetized. I think that's why I told you to bleep that one earlier, and I'm trying not to say it right now. But like
I said it,
you know, still, you got to bleep that, Joe.
Please,
just to make sure John doesn't get demonetized.
I was saying as an example. I wasn't using it.
But I'm saying like we never said the things and meant that way. There's other words where it historically it was meant that way, and so I don't fear words. I get really weird around people who fear words, but I do respect staying away from some of the ones that have real historical context to them. That absolutely is fine.
It just goes back to, again, like the action and reaction. Why take a word, whatever side you're on, I'm not going to use an example word, take that word and really, and really think to yourself, why are you so strongly opinionated on one side or the other?
Ideological capture.
Like, you tell me I can't say the word, so now I'm gonna explain to you why I should be able to say the word. Why do you want to say the word?
It's just I always say this, like, yes, I voted for Trump, but I always say politicians are some of the most unimpressive people I've ever seen. They're just simply so unimpressive. Like, if you look at them, these are people that are just being backed and lobbied by these big pharma companies and local businesses or big local businesses that are supporting them. And essentially, you can just see from just like the things they're voting on. They're being pushed one side to the other. Like, these people, they're just lying to your face, and they get up there and they run the party line. And that's like with the Democrat Party. It's like they have no identity now. No one asked for Kamala Harris from that party. She got pushed in there. They skipped the primary, and they're like, let's just put her in there. And everyone's like, we're going to run with her. And I have friends who are smart people, but they have this like ideological capture. I'm like, you realize she can't speak. She has no opinions. She's literally just
She's
telling
the
you.
worst candidate I ever saw.
I'm like, did you see any? I'm like,
do
did you see any of her interviews? She asked them for all to be edited. She wanted full control over them. Essentially, if she came here, she'd be like, John, I need all the footage, and I get to tell you what goes in there and what doesn't, and what questions you can and can't ask.
Yeah.
There was literally a moment where I almost felt bad for her. I didn't end up feeling bad for her.
Yeah, I was gonna
but
say.
I almost felt bad because, like, no offense, you know, the lights are on, but no one's home.
Yeah.
And you could just see she couldn't hang with him. You know, Trump's gonna talk you in circles, but he's a talker, bro.
He knows
and
what
like
he's doing.
and he knows there's like he's weaving, but there's a lot of thoughts floating around in that head about tariffs, Afghanistan, like, and it's all like, and it'll just come out. Her, she's like, you know, the thing, and it's when you're on a bus, and the bus. It rolls because it's got wheels and it comes downhill and then
You're really good at
it's just that's what it is. It's like people do vote on internal biological prejudices. So let me be careful how I say this. You are already operating from behind when you're talking about a population of 100% of America, roughly. They're not all going to vote, but just think of the voting bloc of America of all walks of life. As a woman, you are already behind the 8 ball a little bit because biologically societies lean towards a stronger man, right? So Hillary Clinton was a very flawed candidate because of her own corruption and shit like that. But Hillary Clinton was a tough bitch. And she talked with a deep voice. It felt like she had the biggest dick in the room. And I've heard that from like tier 1 guys who will talk about it, like when, you know, they had to discuss when she was like Secretary of State missions and stuff. They're like, holy shit, like she doesn't fuck around. So like she had that part. Kamala Harris couldn't put a sentence together, and her body language is like this and talking like this. Like, are you gonna follow her into war?
No.
Like all you need to do is move 2% of society that just biologically is like, that's weak. I can't vote for that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, right.
And again, like we should have a woman president at some point, but not on the basis of her just being a woman.
Exactly. Yeah, correct.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
And it wasn't going to be her.
Yeah.
It was not going to be her.
I really wonder what would have happened if she won.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do you know the term like code switching?
Yeah, of course.
So
It's the most annoying thing in the world.
Yeah,
Bro.
it's
She was the
annoying.
worst with it.
But that's exactly like they were so much into their ideology of like, we're gonna DEI this, we're gonna get a woman, we're gonna, you know, mix racial, whatever it be. And she was just trying to play that part to perfection, but she couldn't.
Yeah.
Because they were really banging on the idea that she'll be able to talk to everybody. And you could see she was like changing her voice around black people versus Indian people.
Yo, but thank a social
versus
worker.
Latin people. Like she like was like, what's up, my ass?
Oh, it was
She just
crazy.
like,
it was
what the
wild.
heck?
One thing Trump will never do is that.
What was it? What Trump said? There was an interview. This was months before she became the candidate. He's like, she talks in rhyme. And Brett Baer was like, what do you mean? He goes, well, you know, the bus, it rolls, it goes uphill, and then it goes down because that's what buses do. It's a rhyme.
And he was
That's all
right.
she does.
And he was right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Like he's so good at branding people to the point that like he's so strongly branding someone that his own shortcomings, even if there's some of the same things, not necessarily that one.
Right.
Like you can't remember he was calling like Ted Cruz like Lion Ted, and Cruz is like, but what about all these things he's lying about? They're like, fuck you, Lion Ted.
Exactly. Listen, he's influential.
He's a
good at
brander.
He's a brander.
He's a brander.
I'm reading The Art of the Deal right now, just because I thought it was humorous. And it's actually so funny how different, because it was written like the 80s. Like this was like when he was in his prime. And it's such a different human. Like reading, I'm like, there's no way this is the same Trump. He's very humble. He's appreciative of other people. He's not an egomaniac at all in this book. I think there was a part where he said something like, oh, somebody wanted to give me free tickets, and that's just not the kind of guy I am. I want to buy it, this and that. I'm like, who the fuck is writing this book? Like, where is this guy?
Who's the ghostwriter?
Yeah, who's the ghostwriter? Because it's not him. But anyway, yeah, exactly. But it's just interesting how even politics will corrupt people. And I'm sure he's got to take a step back and be like, what have I become in a way, you know?
Well, just think of the role. Anyone that wants to be president has to be an egomaniacal narcissist.
You have to be.
Thinking that you can control the future of this country. You know what's best. Like just that idea, and you kind of have to have those people.
Yeah.
Because there's not many people who want to do it. But it is crazy because I always go back to the idea where there's so many smart people that I know that could be in that position, and it's almost they don't want to be in that position, but that we want them in position, kind of like the Jordanian president. Where it's like he didn't want to be in that position.
Gangster, bro.
And his father and his dying wish was like, "You're going to be the president." And he's a great president in the Middle East. We ask all the operators that come on, they're like, "We like this guy.
Love him.
Oh, really?
Like he's awesome." And he didn't want to be in that position. But then you have these people that are just power hungry and want to be in power, and you're just like, dude, like whatever you're saying that sound good along my policies, I don't even know if you're going to accomplish that.
That's the problem,
You just want to get a book and you want to get wealthy and fame and whatever it might be. So it's so hard because, you know, when you're making that decision to vote for these people, you know, like this person is extremely flawed. I don't really like them, but I only have 2 choices. Or the third choice is not vote at all, but then I'm going to be complaining the next 4 years and I'm pissed off and I'm like, shoot, you know what I mean?
You can't.
Like it's such a hard place to be, but you know, I'd really wish there would be someone who would like stand out and just be like, look, just take the moderate.
I'm doing it for the
approach.
right reasons.
Dude, yeah, even then I'd be kind of sketched out too.
I'd be like, okay, sit down.
Yeah, sure, buddy. So
Exactly.
What's the guy that he was just on Flagrant? He, the gay army veteran, really cool guy.
Oh, Pete Buttigieg.
Yeah.
He's pretty good.
Yeah, people like meme him a lot because he was in the last administration. I think he was like Secretary of Transportation or something.
Yeah, he was.
I can't really comment on him. I have no idea what the fuck he did or didn't do. I didn't
watch that
follow the
episode. It's a good
transportation
one.
role.
Yeah,
But
you'll like that episode with him. But,
yeah.
Wow, we talked about a lot today. Not things I expected to talk about. I expected to talk about you guys.
Well, I mean, we've done that too, man.
No, I know,
And you're asking great questions and getting the conversation flowing. I kept telling Alessi, like, John's gotten really good at this. And when we walked out of here at the break, he was like, fuck, John's gotten really good at
No,
this.
stop.
Yeah.
I'm just feeding off of your energy. You
That's
know?
it, man.
I'm like a
But-
chameleon, which is to a fault sometimes.
But I appreciate I appreciate you doing this too. It's nice to Alessi should get a lot more of a light than he's had. Like obviously he's on the episodes, like he's producing, but
Right.
you know, the show's named after me and whatever, so everything tends to come back to me. But when you look at our channels 2 and 3, that whole innovation, like he eventually took those and ran with them and has built those things up completely. So it's fucking amazing. And like when I look back on it, you know, because we're sitting here, we're about to cross 1 million, which is really cool. I guess we have like 1.7 across the 4 channels.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, you only go as far as the people who believe in you. And to have someone believe in me who did not fucking know me almost day one and then switch around their life, also get his now wife to switch around her life as well. Emily moved up here with him, and she's like an expert in the horse industry and horse training. So she got a job up here and was
Nice.
and I know they both hated in New Jersey, and they lived here for me for basically 2.5 years, which is fucking amazing. Like when I look back on that and then the shit we went through that now has like a lot mostly good, but also times that were really bad, and standing by me and being patient with me and helping this thing go, that's the greatest gift anyone could ever get. So, you know, it's also a good time to say like Alessi's moving to be the COO now, I guess. Is that
Yeah,
what
the
title
COO.
do you want? It's up to you.
I don't know. You told me CEO, so I'm like, all right.
Let's sketch it
I'll
out
go
right
with
now.
that.
Let's negotiate. Let's negotiate a little bit. Let's
Alessi has
talk about
done.
this.
Alessi has done the board in the studio on all the episodes, but we want to move into Florida so Emily can be in
Oh,
can
you're
be down
moving.
there in horse country, which is great. Also, they love it in Florida, so he's going to be moving to Florida and doing everything that he already does for the show right now, and kind of expanding that, and continuing to build these channels and being the point guard on everything we do. So that all stays the same. The only thing that's changing is he won't physically do the actual recordings.
Who's gonna do
And,
that?
and we gotta step on camera, Mr.
Wait, you
Joey Deef.
This one, next to him.
Right.
Yeah, no, yeah. Other
Yeah,
one,
next
please.
to
Thank
him.
you.
Yeah, right there.
Yeah, just say hello.
Hey, how are you? How
New
you doing?
producer.
Which,
Hey, how are you?
by the way, John, like, you know, Joe's one of my best friends, but it's another person that
We're all
the
intertwined.
Godfather John Rondi
We're all like
introduced
this.
to me back in the day.
Isn't that crazy?
Deef was on episodes 103 and 132, and you know I love everything Deef does as well. He's one of the most talented creative guys I've ever known. So when this was happening, Alessi was nice enough to be like, yo, I'm not going to move for like 90 days. Let's get this figured out. So we get it all set up for the in studio, which was fucking gangster, by the way. So of
course.
Thank you and Emily for that. But, you know, Deef was like, yo, I'll totally do that. And I was like, what? Like, you don't want to do this. And he's like, I want to do that. And I think it works well because Deef's going to do all the in-person recordings. He and I are both very similar minded, so creativity gets to bounce off of each other. And Deef's also written 3 scripts, a movie script, 2 play scripts. One of them's going off Broadway this summer. And I think, you know, he's going to be able to keep building all that. This is really good from like a time perspective, gets his bills paid. He gets to be around. I love that. And also like he keeps building his shit. And I think in the next couple of years, your big break's going to happen for sure. You've been at this for like a decade. So it'll be cool. Selfishly, it'll also be cool if that happens as a part of the Julian Dorey cinematic universe that you're in now.
Don't forget about us.
Right? Right?
Yeah.
But it's we got a great little like family on the show Foreman, which is very cool. So it's a cool moment. There's a lot of things crystallizing right now, and you know, it never goes like this, man. It's always like this and just
And
keeps
you feel
going.
and you feel every bump, man.
Right. And we're getting way better at handling those bumps. I mean, you can ask him. He'd say this is crazy, but I don't even look when a lot of the episodes come out now. I'll look a few
that's
hours
wild
later
to
and
me.
check it. I used to screenshot every single analytic every 5 minutes. You know,
Trust me, I know.
there's about 60,000
Like,
screenshots.
tranquilo,
in this phone. But,
Awesome. Maybe I'll have Joey on the podcast one day.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that.
Yeah,
Maybe
for
for your
sure,
new
but-
promotion of the show that's coming out.
Yeah, definitely that. For sure.
But thanks for
Right.
helping make that happen.
Yeah,
If you
listen.
never introduced us. We're not there. So
Well, it is funny you mentioned, like, again, the energy that he can provide into the room for you, creative mind and super talented guy. And I joked about it before that I kind of like am a chameleon with energy, but it's true. Like the people you surround yourself with are so important.
critical.
Maybe for me especially, like I feel like for whatever reason I, to a fault, allow people to kind of get in the way or enhance my emotions or however I'm feeling on that day. So being around people like, I got my guy behind the camera, Joe,
the homie
who also hops on camera once in a while.
Acropology.
He doesn't realize how important his role is just to keep me mentally checked in. Like there's been plenty of days where I'm like, I don't want to fucking do this, and he's like, we have to.
Joe's
we have
like,
to just
I ain't
keep
making
going.
enough money for this, bro.
Yeah. He's like, you gotta pay me more. That's all he cares about is the money. This guy. Nah, but again, I think it's super important to surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think, you know, and you mentioned before, you're like, you know, we haven't made it yet, but, and I want to stop you there and mention that like you have made it, you're continuing to make it, but there's never gonna be, you're never gonna feel like that.
No, but I think listen, I don't want to whenever I reach that point, I don't want to take on that mentality of like, I've made it, I'm good. We'll never do that.
Of course not.
But there, like, I can kind of see. It's very hard for me to explain in words. We'd be sitting here with me boring you for probably a half hour trying to actually lay it out. But I know exactly what that will look like to be like, okay, we've made it. We've arrived. And that has not happened yet. And that's okay. It takes a long time. We built this organically out of my fucking parents' house. No one gave a shit about me anywhere, let alone on the internet before I did this. So it's like building brick by brick, square one. But, you know, you do constantly live in that idea of you are only as good as your last video. And to an extent that will never change, but you can buy yourself the staying power to be at a point where,
Sure, I understand.
you know, you could have a couple months where maybe you're just not quite as good, shit's going on in your life, whatever, and you're going to be fine. I don't have that luxury right now. That's the one thing about like when we were going through the hard times and I just mentally, emotionally, physically, everything was gone. My swagger was gone. My confidence was completely gone. Everything was gone. The one place where I didn't lose it, and I think it's because of survival instincts, was in the studio. In the studio, I had elephant balls. When I walked in there, this is going to be the best podcast you ever did. Right? But when I walked out, I was a broken fucking excuse for a human. And now we've got that on a good trajectory. So it's good in life. But like, you got to have that mentality right now. And in the future, I want to be able to know it's going to be okay if I'm not as good for a couple months because shit's going on or whatever. Yeah. And we're not there yet. So when we're at that point, it'll be like we've arrived. But you're just a guest. You're in the house, but your ass can get kicked out of that house. And you always got to keep that. It doesn't matter if you're Joe Rogan. You know, you got to keep that in the back of your mind.
Comes down to being a Christian. this isn't really your life. It's borrowed from somebody else. It's given to you. You know.
That's not where I was going with
I
that.
know, but you kind of went there. So thank you for that.
Hey, do what you want.
If you, and I really want you to try to do this because I struggle with this a lot. Take yourself back 5 years ago. It's your first episode, and you get to interview this Julian Dorey. What are those emotions feeling like towards that person? How do you feel about this Julian Dorey being that past Julian Dorey?
I would have. Wait, are you saying the old one is interviewing the one now?
Right.
Sorry, I missed that.
Yeah. So like, how I want you to kind of like
I would have
yourself.
been completely unsurprised.
That's awesome.
Not by how it happened. I would have been like, you did what? And then you did what? And then it got there and you got to this point and then you almost like you were fucking dying in there and then I would have been like, holy shit. But the end result of like at least where we are right now, I would have been like, took you long enough. Like,
But you knew.
fuck yeah. This was the one time I was always the guy, and this is not a good way to be. Like, you should never be the braggart and the person that's like, I'm good at everything. Whatever. You should not be that way. That's horrible to be. The opposite is also a way you should not be. You should not tell yourself you're bad at everything. That is something I did for a lot of my life. And when I was in those 6 months building silently, which, you know, that's just kind of how it worked. Like, I was like, yeah, I'm not going to tell anyone about this. I'm just going to build. Really glad I did that because I got to get alone with myself in here, working in a studio, getting used to everything, learning everything, and iterating. And like as I was first editing myself, it's still cringy to this day to edit myself, but it was like super cringy at the beginning. Yeah. You and I have talked about this before. I did have that moment where one edit for like 10, 15 minutes, I was clicking the cameras back and forth and forgot I was editing. And it was a solo episode when it was just me talking, and I paused it. It was like 2 a.m. or whatever it was, and I was like, "Okay, I can do this. Yeah. You're good at this." Like, and I'm like in my head, I'm like, "God damn, you suck." But it was like that's because I know I can get that much better, which means for whatever reason in this thing, I got a God-given talent for this, and look the fuck out below. And that is kind of what that's like the first time I was ever able to do that and take control of my life and not try to have other people help me out to see what's within me, which I'm grateful for too. Like if I didn't have the Chaz Servinos, if I didn't have the Mitch and Mike Laxamanas, if I didn't have the Alessi Allemans along the way even, right? But I'm talking to the guys before I ever did this, the Ty Martins of the world. These guys were like, you need to do this shit. Right. Turn that camera around. Let's fucking go. Jules, you got the interview, right? Go do it. Like I would have never done this. So it's a lot of people that I owe that to. And it's I guess it's nice to be reflective when you're reaching certain milestones, but I don't think of it like that. Like people are like, oh, how are you going to feel at 1 million or whatever? And be like another day. 999. You know, like I feel losses, but with wins, it's like, that's what I expected of myself. So let's keep fucking going. Like you put anyone at this point, it's just about dance partners. I just need the right dance partners in there. I mean, and the people that are going to make some news, not because we're making them make news, but because they're doing shit that makes news and they happen to be talking with me about it. Because when that happens, that's it. That's a wrap. I know I can do this at the highest level and I can still get so much better. And it's like, damn, we're here at this point and I can get that much better. And I'm finally feeling good again too, which is helping, you know, health-wise. It's like, yeah, I'm a problem. I know that.
Yeah.
I know that.
I want to get your feedback on a thought that I've had. And remember, we talked about like fleshing out thoughts. This is the first time, so bear with me here. I heard Hormozy talking about this, and like the downfall of manifestation is the thought and assumption that I deserve this thing
right.
without any sort of work. And the result is the lack of grace that you feel when you earn that thing, right? So if I am in the place of I deserve nothing, I'm given nothing, I have to work for every single thing I have.
Yes.
And even when I work really hard, I don't know what the result is going to be. When I do then get that thing, I feel so gracious for that because that's not supposed to be mine. Whereas people that manifest and they sit in the rooms and say, I am this and I deserve that. And then they wake up the next day, they don't have this thing. They're very upset, number one. But worse than that is when they do receive this thing, they feel like you said, well, it's about time. And you forget to have grace for these moments, which is why I think it's kind of hard for you. You could feel your losses, of course, but it's sort of hard for you to feel your wins. Like if you had 1 million subscribers given to you on day one, you'd be like, what the fuck is this? This
That's
was
right.
amazing. But because it's been so gradual and you knew in the back of your head, like this was supposed to happen, it's sort of hard to feel gracious for this thing.
It's a good point you make, and Mosey's point on that is so true. It's like, it's not to beat yourself down, but yeah, you don't deserve shit. You have to go out and take it. That's how the world works. You can be the greatest at something, the greatest talent. You know how many of those guys never make it? Because they don't want it like that.
Yeah.
You got to fucking want it. And however that happens, that happens. And I don't want to sit here and be like, this is real, this isn't real. I don't know. The universe works in weird ways. People's minds work in different ways.
Sure.
I've never been one of those guys that like looks in the mirror and says like 10 fucking manifestation affirmations that are just like, then I work to make them come true. Maybe that's real, but you better work to make them come true.
Sure.
There's a lot of people who are like, I'm just going to keep thinking this and get in this mindset and talk in a certain way and be positive and bring everyone's energy up and just say we're going to do this thing, but they never actually do the, even if they put in the work, they don't do the things that are required to iterate and get to that point. It's like, y'all are just waiting for the fucking ocean to hit you and you're standing in the desert. Like that's not how the world works.
Yeah.
And I've never been that guy. I live in today. I'm not even, the only long-term goal I've ever had is I want to be the number one podcast in the world. And I'm going to be. I've said that since day one. But it's like, I'm not one of these guys that writes down these goals and shit like at this date, I'm going to be at X subscribers or whatever.
Right.
Maybe some of that would help. Maybe I could look at that in the future. But I am a guy who's like, what am I doing today? How do I get 0.001% better? Which compounds at 44% the first year. I think it's like 87% the second year. This shit adds up. That is not much. Like even when I was starting back in the gym at the end of 2023, couldn't do anything because the treatments weren't working yet. And it was just like, I'm trying to get into the fucking schedule here. It was like, just get 0.001% better tomorrow. And like if I can do that in 5 out of 6 or 4 out of 6 workouts a week, which means even a couple, you fail. Not because you're planning that, but you fail. You're still going to get 30% better that year or whatever. Yeah. And I was able to do that. And it's like, then you have a day where you get 1% better because you're just fucking flying. And now you make up for the, you know what I mean? Yeah. It's the same thing in life and in business and whatever it is. So if you have a dream and you're honest with yourself about whether or not you have the existing level of talent that's required to actually make that realistic. Like if I came out here and I said, John, I have a dream to be the MVP of the NBA. You're going to say, Julian, you're white. And you know you're 30. Like this is not going to work, right? But if I say I have a dream to be the number one podcast in the world, you may look at me and say, all right, you have the requisite base level talent, but now go out and do the work for it. Mm-hmm. And you've been there since almost day one too. You've seen it. You saw it when it was at a humble 200 subscribers and you're coming on. And I remember you just looking at, you were one of the first guys that like actually knew that world a little bit. And I don't know what you were thinking, but the way it came across to me is at the end of that, you were looking at me like, I don't know what this is or how this is going to work, but like you got it. And dude, you're going to figure it out.
I don't know why I had so much confidence and conviction in you. I walked in on that set as if I was on a set of somebody that already had 1 million subscribers. And I've been on now podcasts of other people. And respectfully to them, I've never felt that feeling that I had with you. And that was one of your first episodes. And I was like, aura. For whatever, it's the aura, right? It's the end. And we talked about the unspoken energy and the things we can't explain. He just had it. And we talked for fucking hours. It was like an 8-hour day. And I'm like, this guy just had, I don't know what that it is, but he has that thing. And if he keeps going, he's going to eventually, achieve what he really wants to achieve.
But I appreciate that because I fed off that. A lot of times in my life, it felt like people either doubted me or cast me aside, or I was left out of shit too as an only child. That was a big thing. And we can always feel that, like when we're left out of shit, at least for the other people out there listening who are only children, you probably understand. But it's like, when I get that affirmation from people, and it's not just bullshit, like trying to gas me up, and there's a piece of it, especially when it's people who will also criticize you and tell you where you got to get better, which is something you were always unafraid to do, which I appreciate a lot. That's what, when I hear those types of things from those people, like, you got this, that is like the ultimate, like, holy shit, thank you, let's go. But also, man, I got to prove that guy right. You know what I mean? Like, he's betting on me. Yeah. Let me not fuck this up. Let me prove this right to him. And I sit up at night. It's like when I don't work hard enough or things don't go right because I make stupid mistakes, it's like that's a slap in the face to the people that believe in me.
I forget, again, I heard somebody else talking about, like, you become a man not when you get your driver's license or you turn 21, is when you have other people, you're now accountable and you have other people to kind of look after. And that for you, I think you kind of need to build that in, is like, you're not just doing this for you. Because if you were, you'd probably just do a whole lot of nothing. You're doing this for other people that now believe in you. And because of what you put out there, they're now on this journey with you. And you'll be damned if you're going to let someone like me or whoever it is down, right? I'm in this camp with you, and now I want to see you succeed as almost as bad as you do, type of thing. So
yeah, I feel it, man. I appreciate it. There's a lot of people in this room, pretty much everyone in this room, that I feel that way about. And you know, some have been there since working alongside me for years, and others are doing that with me now, and have been there as a friend along the way too. And you know, obviously, like, gassing me up, and it's a beautiful thing, man. So I'm very, that is one thing about getting to this symbolic point or whatever. Yeah. Over the past month, especially, like, since we got this whole situation figured out too, that was big for me. You know, like, the zen and gratitude I felt towards guys like you, Alessi. I mean, really starting with Alessi and then working your way down from there to other people who believed in me. It's like on a whole nother level. And I don't know, when I look back on it, there's no way to financially repay belief like that, and like what you had coming up here to do this and switching your life around. I know you probably naturally, and I fully understand this, had people in your family who are like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. Why are you following this? And they're probably horrified. This guy from New Jersey, and they listen to me talk. They think I'm in the mob or something. They're like, why are you going up there? You know, literally. but that was kind of a joke.
Yeah, Joe's like, oh, okay. Anyway.
I like the Allaman. I've heard great things, but maybe I need to reconsider. Yeah. But, you know, in all seriousness, I will never be able to repay that. So I appreciate you a lot, brother, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
No,
thank
awesome.
you.
And that's why it's so important I know you're everybody's biggest cheerleader, and sometimes you need somebody to pat you on the back. So where in a year from now, give us where this podcast is going to be.
I think we're going to be in the upper stratosphere a year from now. Yeah.
We're about to catch our stride.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, really.
I think so.
A new stride, because we already had several strides.
Yes. But, and I'll say this right now, and that's what I believe is going to happen, and we're going to work towards that. I'm going to be undeterred regardless. If we're not where we need to be a year from now, then that means whatever's happening along the way, we're going to triple down on that and learn from that and get where we got to go. Because it's never on the schedule you want in both directions. Sometimes things come sooner and later. That's out of your control. The algorithm's out of your control, but you got to keep iterating and, you know, build a good team and stay true to yourself. And that's what we're going to do. Yeah. One last Christian related point, because there was one verse that I read that really changed my perspective on a lot of things. And it was a verse discussing, like, God, if it be your will. You know, I think a lot of times I would get nervous to put something out there, especially with a timeline, like a deadline, because if it didn't happen, then I'd feel super embarrassed. Then I'd be like, well, then why didn't it work? I manifested this whole thing. But it's like, God, if it be your will, hope, you know, this would happen. And if it doesn't happen, then it's not your will, right? I'm going to still keep working hard. If in a year from now you don't have the sub count that you wanted, that's okay. I'm going to keep grinding at this thing because, God, if it be your will, it's not a guarantee because I said this thing. Fact. It's his guarantee. Yeah, so that kind of that for me changed perspective on belief as a whole. You know, not just towards him.
There's a similar verse. It's Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans for you, declares the Lord, plans for you to prosper, not to harm, plans to give you hope and a future. I always think about that, where it's like, no matter the outcome, you're going exactly where you should be going. Right. Yeah. No matter what. And if you're tied to it so much where you're like, you're so disappointed by the outcome, you have to realize it's not what he wanted for you. So it's just keep going. Absolutely. There's also a great verse from Tupac Amaru Shakur.
No, please tell us.
Wars come and go, but my soldiers, they stay eternal.
I love that. Well, that's it for today, everybody. Like, subscribe. Anything you want to plug, by the way? Anything you want to throw out there?
Follow Julian Dorey on YouTube and follow Alessi Allaman on YouTube. He's doing some insanely good documentaries. So
that's awesome.
Check that
I didn't
out.
know that. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys again for coming out.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate your time. So that's it for today, everybody. Like, subscribe, share all the good stuff. Cheers.